Okay, good morning, everyone. The Transportation and Commerce Committee will come to order this beautiful Tuesday, chilly Tuesday morning, October 18th. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Vaquero.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderwoman
Here.
Evans. Alderwoman Evans.
Present.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderman Gross.
Present.
Chair Cone.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
She said that she was present.
Okay, thank you. That's 7 present. We have a quorum.
Holy moly, we have everyone in attendance today. That's amazing. I love that. The first item on our order of business is the approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our Wednesday, July 12th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Vaquero.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Gross.
Aye.
Chair Cone.
Aye.
7 votes present.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have a number of board bills from the airport this morning, so we'll go ahead and take those up. Item number 1 is board bill number 97. Rhonda, are you speaking on that, or is there someone from your team that'll be speaking to that?
I will have Rob Salarano present, and then Antonio and myself and Rob will be available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Rob, take it away.
Good morning, Aldermen and Alderwomen. My name is Robert Salarano. I'm the Properties Division Manager for the Airport Authority. We're requesting your approval today of a second amendment to the Airport Use and Lease Agreement. This is the AUA is the governing agreement and it governs the relationship between the airport and our signatory airlines. There are currently 13 signatory airlines at the airport. This second amendment extends the expiration date of the current AUA agreements and, when applicable, the cargo addendums to the AUAs. It also adjusts the signatory commitment for each airline. The signatory commitment is the amount of money that each airline agrees to spend over the term of the agreement. The second amendment extends the expiration date of the AUA 2 years to June 30th, 2025. We respectfully request your approval of this second amendment to the current AUAs at St. Louis Lambert International Airport.
Chairman Cohen, may I add one comment to that, please?
Absolutely.
So just to give everybody a feel for why we're asking for the extension to the current AUA for the 2-year window is that we are in the process, I think, as most of you know, of considering a possible terminal consolidation build at the airport. Those negotiations will take place starting this November. We anticipate that process is going to take anywhere from 16 to 24 months. During that process, we would be negotiating a longer-term agreement along with the potential build of the new terminal in that agreement. So this is really a stepping stone to get us from the current expiration date, which is June of next year, for this new 2-year window. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there others that were going to speak on the bill? I think you mentioned Antonio, or?
I think we're just available if there's additional questions.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, we'll take questions from the committee. I'll start with Alderman Vaquero.
I don't have a question, but for the new members of the committee, and I was on the airport commission, I know what the signatory airlines are and what some of the initials and abbreviations, whatever you want to call them, are. Could you explain what the signatory airlines? I realize it's not where it's at. I know what it is, but if you could, for the new members that may or may not know what that is.
Rob, do you want to cover that?
Sure. Signatory airlines are airlines that really they make a commitment to the airport.
So signatory carriers, are your legacy carriers for the most part that are committed to a long-term lease agreement. So carriers like Southwest, American, Delta, United, Frontier, Spirit, Alaska, all of those carriers are signatory carriers. If you have a carrier who operates maybe just seasonal, like a Sun Country, or you have a carrier that operates maybe just one flight a day, they may choose to sign what we call an airport AUA, just an agreement as opposed to the longer term use and lease agreement. So if they sign the longer term lease agreement as a signatory airline, that means they have a vote in the way we operate. They have a vote in any MII, a majority in interest that they take. If you're a non-signatory carrier, you just pay a fee for the flight that you operate on that particular day, and you do not have voting rights when it comes to decision-making at the airport.
Thank you. That was all. I mean, I knew what it was. I just thought with new members, they might want to understand what the differences things are out there.
No, that was a good point. Thank you.
Anything else, Alderman?
No, that was all. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Middlebrook,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evan, or I'm sorry, Alderman Narayan,
No questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans.
Good morning. I just have one question. How many airlines don't have the privilege of voting?
I believe we just have two right now. We have Sun Country, which does seasonal service, or they do charter activity. And the other one could be Southern Airlines. It's a small operator that operates what we call an essential air service market, like I think the market they're currently in is Jackson, Tennessee. Otherwise, all of the other carriers, to my knowledge, are signatory. Rob, do you have that list in front of you?
I do. There's there's a number of other carriers, Rhonda, that aren't signatory that act as regional, that
Okay.
act as feeders for the major carriers. So we've probably got about a dozen non-signatory airlines that will operate under contract to the signatory airlines. So the signatory airlines are in the end responsible for their bills and their landing fees and those other items. But they operate under contract, and that also includes a number of cargo carriers.
Yeah, we currently have 13 signatory airlines.
Thank you. No further questions.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at the Section 2 adjustments to signatory commitment and seeing it went from 1,400,000 to 1,800,000. I'm trying to figure out, is that yearly? Is that for the entire term of this, or is that some other amount of time?
That's the term of the agreement, and that extends to that. That is to correspond with a 2-year extension for each signatory commitment.
So no, they paid 1,400,000 every 2 years prior to this, and now it's going up.
Well, 1,400,000 over the term of the agreement. So it's, I think, the $200,000 every year is what it comes out to be, I believe, if my math is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Alderman Gross.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is there anyone who's signed up to testify in favor or opposition?
No, we have no speakers in opposition or in favor.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill number 97.
So moved.
Well, I
Second.
need what's the motion?
Well, you said, okay, I'll make a motion that we pass Board Bill 97 out with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Okay, so it's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd Ward that we move with the due pass recommendation to pass out Board Bill 97 from committee. It's been seconded by the Alderwoman from the 4th Ward. There's been a call for previous roll. Is there any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill number 97 passes out of committee with a due pass recommendation. The next item on the agenda is Board Bill number 98. Again, this is another board bill pertaining to the airport. Rhonda, who would you like to have speak on this one?
Rob will present. Thank you.
Okay. Is Rob presenting for all 4 of them?
He's presenting for 3. Latanya will present for the bond sale, which is Board Bill 108, I believe.
102. Okay.
102, I'm sorry.
Okay. Rob, if you could speak to Board Bill number 98.
Aldermen and Alderwomen, we're requesting your approval for the third amendment to the on-airport passenger vehicle rental concession agreements at STL. We currently have 7 rental car companies with concession agreements with the city. And the premises for these rental car companies is just simply designated shuttle parking positions on the airport drives. Each rental car company pays us a minimum annual guarantee that was based on their bid amount. The minimum annual guarantee is unchanged from the past contract years. And this third amendment extends the term of the agreement 1 year. The agreement commenced January 2015 and will now end December 31st, 2023. We continue to see the rental car companies respond to COVID and their financial position out here. Some of them don't make their MAG every month, at least a few of them. And we negotiated this extension with the rental car companies as a response to that.
Hey, Rob, I am going to kind of follow up on my colleague from the 23rd request. And when we have acronyms, can you just explain them a little bit for the newer folks that are on the committee? So MAG is minimum annual guarantee. Could you just...
I apologize. The minimum annual guarantee is we call it the MAG at the airport. I'll call it minimum annual guarantee from now on. And that's the minimum amount that the rental car companies are obligated to pay the airport each year. And that is the minimum, and that's versus a percentage fee. And for all the rental car companies, that percentage fee is a set 10%, which is pretty much the industry standard. And the minimum annual guarantee amounts are bid by each airline at the beginning of the contract.
And once they meet those, if indeed they meet that minimum annual guarantee, then they pay 10% of the gross receipt above that. So if they've exceeded more revenue that year than what that bid amount is, then they pay 10% above that.
Yeah, it's okay if you call it MAG. I just, for the first time going through it, if you could just explain it for folks. I know that's a mouthful. Okay, I'll entertain questions. Or is there anyone else from the airport that would like to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, questions from the committee, Alderman Vaquero.
No, I just remember MAG wheels being on my car. It's a joke. Anyway, no question.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Alderman Narayan,
No questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans,
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you. I'm just interested in how this has changed with COVID and kind of coming back to more flights going in and out with more people. How are they doing now?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Thank you, Alderwoman. You know, I think we've seen a nice recovery in the last, especially this year. If we look at the year to date versus pre-pandemic, and we look at 2019 as the pre-pandemic, we are running about 15% behind in total passenger enplanements from 2019. 2019 was the best year that we had seen in 15, so it was extremely strong. Most of that 15% that we're under really was driven by the first 3 months of 2022 when the Omicron variant came out. So if we look at the summer loads and we look at the September and October loads, we're running almost equal to where we were in 2019. Some of the challenge for the rental car industry is the shortage of vehicles that's available. With the issue that came about with the chip shortage, there just has not been the same number of vehicles available to the industry as a whole. So while they have charged higher prices, they have struggled to meet the demand based on the shortages they have. So what you'll see, not only today, but even I think next month as we get into the November commission with some board bills coming forward, we're trying to adjust those contracts that were expiring and give the benefit of during the COVID of an additional year or two to be able to try and recoup those losses. So we anticipate that 2023, we will be back to the pre-pandemic levels, potentially even exceeding those. The challenge in that is just going to be the airplane availability based on the shortage. There certainly is the demand from a customer perspective at this point, assuming things continue moving in the right direction and the pandemic doesn't rear its ugly head again.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Thanks, Alderwoman. Alderman Gross.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay. I do have a question just around kind of the back end here. So we were talking dates in terms of negotiations with the last board bill and with the potential, renovation of the airport. These dates don't seem to coincide with those. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that was an extension of the airport use and lease agreement. We anticipate that the negotiations on the new terminal are going to take that time frame. When we look at other entities that may be expiring, like the rental cars, they're really not part of that same airport use and lease agreement. So we didn't want to do a long-term extension with rental cars because we'd like to put that back out. This 1-year extension, they would have liked to have a little bit longer. For us, we think that 1 year will give us a chance to recover from COVID, and then we would like to put out a new RFP to be able to sort of, see what the industry is doing and what the trends are. So they really don't correspond, Chairman Cohn, to each other than their tenants at the airport.
Okay. So is that also applicable for the concessions that are in the airport as well, or are we handling those separately, similar to how we're doing the use agreement with the airlines?
Right. We're looking at each one independent, and you'll see. I don't know if it did not make today's agenda, but you'll see that we are doing some food and beverage changes. Those are really tied in to the longer term of how long it would take if we get the agreement on the terminal to build the new terminal with the concession. So coming up on next month, you're going to see some board bills coming forward that will address some of the food and beverage concessions. The retail concession right now does not expire until 2026, I believe, but the food and beverage contract expires next year. So we are working on an extension on that as well, but that has not yet gone to commission. It should be on the November commission. So we do have to look at each of our partners kind of independent relative to, are they impacted by COVID and construction, or just the COVID, or just the construction of what we're doing right now?
Okay. And then are we doing RFPs for those as well with the extensions?
If it's an extension, it's based on the current, whatever it was, whether it was a solicitation or an RFP. But as we're putting out new bids, those are going out as RFPs for the most part.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions on board bill number 98?
I just have a quick technical question. I was finding the bills separately, but I'm going into my drive, and under shared drives, I see pretty much all the committees except transportation and commerce. So I was just wondering is that just me, or does everybody else have the drive link for today?
I received the drive link this morning, so I just went directly to it. Madam Clerk, can you provide Alderman Gross with some clarification there?
I'll send you the drive link.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes,
Sorry, Alderman.
Oh,
sometimes
no, it's okay. I was
you may have to just refresh here, because I have it too.
Alderman Gross, can you confirm once you have that link from the clerk?
Yep.
You should have it now.
Okay, look at me. Yeah, I'm assuming you're saying it's my city email. I just. Mhm.
Yeah, I just sent it. It's showing it went through on my end and it is your city email.
Alderman Gross, you want to try logging in again, refreshing it?
Yeah, I've hit refresh and everything, but I'll log out of it and log back in. I mean, I'm on cross them in St. Louis. Yeah, Schmo, I'm assuming. Hold on. Right. Okay, got the link. Okay, it says I need access, and I'm signed in as Gross Emmett. I'm signed in as my city thing, but I don't have access. I'll request access. Request sent. You'll get an email letting you know if the file is shared with you.
Have you had issues getting into the Transportation and Commerce Drive before?
I feel like the only time I've ever done it, I think there's only been one other meeting since I've been on the committee, and I think
Okay.
I'm able to get into it at that meeting.
Madam Clerk, did you get the request for access?
Yes, I did. I did talk to Clerk Kennedy and he's saying he's sent it a couple of times as well. So he's gonna look into it and get back with me.
All right, I'm in it now.
Okay, all
Okay,
right. We'll proceed with Board Bill number 98. I'll entertain a motion that we pass Board Bill number 98 with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
You can say it either way.
Well, I've
Say it the other way if you want.
so
Previous
it's been moved by the alderman from the 23rd ward, seconded by the alderwoman from the 2nd ward. There's been a call for previous roll. Is there any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill number 98 passes out with a due pass recommendation. We'll take up item number 3 on the agenda, which is Board Bill number 99. I believe, Rob, you're presenting on this one as well.
That's correct, Chairman. We're requesting your approval today, the First Amendment to the Electronics Retail Concession Agreement with HG St. Louis JV2. This dovetails kind of nicely with the last discussion. This is one of the retail concessions we had at the airport. HG St. Louis JV2 is a joint venture with Hudson News Corporation, which is a major airport retailer, and ACDBE Partners, OHM Concession Group, Final Phase Marketing, and New Burns Management. They operate 4 electronics retail outlets at the airport under the Tech on the Go brand, on Concourse A, Concourse C, and then 2 units on Terminal 2. This First Amendment extends the term of the electronics retail agreement 37 months and will now end January 31st, 2026. This term extension is related, as Rhonda noted, to a COVID recovery. It's also, we picked the term extension to end concurrently to the news and gift concession agreement. One of the plans at the airport beginning then is to sort of reconfigure our retail program and have the freedom to switch premises around between news and gift and electronics at that time, depending on other airport development, of course. The revenue to the airport is the sum of the minimum annual guarantee of $375,000 or the percentage fee of 12% is applied to the gross receipts. This amendment extends the term, resets the MAG to the contract year 6 MAG, and adjusts their midterm capital investment requirement to a same-day fresh requirement. We respectfully request your approval of this first amendment to the electronics retail concession.
Mr. Chairman, may I add one comment to that?
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, ACDBE is Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Program. So the partners that they have, where he mentioned OHM and the secondary partner are the disadvantaged business partner participation with them. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take questions from the committee, starting with Alderman Vaquero.
So I just a quick question. So what is the minority participation? I mean, I see where it's coming from, but what percent?
Right now, it's a joint venture, Alderman. So the minority participation is 14% from final phase, an additional 8.5% from OHM, an additional 8.5% from New Burns Management. So that adds up to 31% total, sir.
Okay, thank you. It's a curious question. I have no other question.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Alderman Narayan,
No questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans,
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer,
No questions, thanks.
Alderman Gross.
I just want to clarify, are we talking about like, actually, when we talk about electronics retailers, are we talking about kind of like those vending machine things you see at the thing, or stores that just sell electronics?
No, sir. These are what we call bricks and mortar, the stores
Okay.
that are where they sell the electronics.
So there are different agreements then for like the clothes stores in there and then all that, everyone kind of has different agreements?
We have two separate retail agreements. We have the electronics retail agreements and also a news, gift, and specialty retail concession agreement, which is another Hudson joint venture, Hudson St. Louis JV1, and they operate the news and gift and specialty retail concessions.
Gotcha. Okay. No further questions.
I'm just kind of going back to my earlier question around the dates and extensions and whatnot. So at least in the summary that is provided here on the agenda, I don't have the board bill pulled up. Is the original agreement dated from 2015?
That's correct.
And so we haven't had an RFP then since 2015, or?
No, this is the agreement was set to expire in 2000 later this year, and so this is an extension related, as I said, to COVID, and also our wish to rework the premises in the airport.
Okay.
One additional comment I'll add to that, Chairperson, is it's quite complicated right now. I mean, if we look at the industry and what's happened with the concessionaires, all the concessionaires, whether it's food, beverage, retail, during that 2-year window, I mean, literally for, a year, they went with significant losses of revenue. As they got into 2021, the losses were less, but still pretty clearly loss of revenue. This year, they're starting to get back on track with seeing those revenue, be pre-pandemic levels. But the industry trends are for those that are currently in that expiration window to give them that opportunity to recoup. So we're kind of following with the trends. The more challenging piece for us is the whole new terminal negotiation concept. And if we indeed are able to negotiate that agreement and bring that forward, obviously we would do bond sales, and that would all come through this group as well as the full board. But the timing of all of that is very tricky because the terminal would come down in phases. So to put out a new RFP when we yet don't have an agreement, yet we know that the hope is we move this forward, you need to do a fairly good number of years. And right now, we just don't have the certainty level of knowing exactly what those years might be. So it is, you'll see over the next couple of months, or even in the next 3 or 4 months, these contracts that are coming due, all are very complicated when we're trying to put them in play with the potential terminal build. So we'll try to walk through each one of those with all of you to make sure you understand our thoughts and our reasoning behind them. Clearly, we've had to give this a lot of thought. This particular one was fairly simple because the larger retail expires in 26. So we thought it would be good just to extend this electronic, which is a retail, that we would morph it to the same extension date that the larger one has. And by that time, we should have a feel, one, that the recovery is permanent and we're out of it, but two, where are we at with the negotiations of the new terminal? And would we be issuing a new RFP, or would we be looking at an extension to get us for, 3 or 4 years as we go through the build? So it's fairly complicated right now in trying to manage through each of these.
Oh, sure. I completely understand that. I just want to make sure that, we're not having a non-competitive process for, a decade or more. So, 2015, if that's the original date of the agreement, that was 7 years ago. And then we're extending it for another 36 months or so, through 2026, right? So I just want to make sure that that's a long time to go without a competitive bid. So I just want to make sure that we're being fair, and also evaluating all of our options at the same time. But totally understand. I mean, it's very complicated right now with everything that's going on with the terminal revamp.
One additional comment on that, just for industry standard, because of the initial investment that is required, whether it's food and beverage or retail, it's not uncommon to see those go out for 15-year RFPs.
Okay.
So especially on the food and beverage side, that's pretty much the industry standard, is a minimum of 15 years. And on the retail, it may be a little bit less, but it still is more of a 10-year standard. So, they're unlike some smaller concessions where you say, let's bid for 3 years if we're looking at a professional services, or if we're looking at some sort of a maintenance agreement. When you think about, many times these investments are 20, 30, $40 million investments.
Right.
So the time frame on those is usually longer.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. I guess the other side to that too is not just the competitive bid process, but making sure that the concessions and whatnot don't start looking tired after a couple of years, and that they're investing in the establishments that they've been operating for so long at this point. I am curious, Rob, just you mentioned the MAG and 12%. Is it the greater of either of those or the lesser of the two that they're responsible for paying?
They're responsible for the greater of the two.
Okay. All right.
The minimum annual guarantee or the percentage fee once they pass the minimum annual guarantee.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Just going through my participant list here to see. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. With that, I'll entertain a motion that we pass Board Bill 99 out with a due pass recommendation.
I'll make a motion that we pass Board Bill 99 out with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous role.
Okay. It's been motioned by the Alderman from the 23rd Ward. I think that was a tie between the 4th and the 24th Ward. So I'll go with the Alderwoman from the 4th Ward on that one. I think I heard her by just a hair. There's been a call for previous role. Is there any objection to previous role? Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill number 99 passes out with a do pass recommendation. Next on the agenda is Board Bill number 102. Latanya,
Yes,
good morning.
good morning. On behalf of Comptroller Darlene Green, I would like to thank Chairman Cone, members of the Transportation Committee, and the clerk to the Board of Aldermen for accepting and introducing Board Bill number 102, which is to authorize an issue up to $150 million worth of airport revenue bonds. This issuance will, one, finance the cost of the purchasing for improvements to the airport, fund our capitalized interest fund, and our debt service reserve account, and any additional costs associated with issuance of the bond. A few members of our financing team is present today and will present to you this morning, which is Ramon Ortega and David Stemple of Siebert Williams Shank, which is the financial advisors to the airport, Rebecca Perry Glickstein of PFM, which is the financial advisor to the city, Clarence Bourne of Loop Capital, a senior manager for the airport transaction. And I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda. And then the financial advisors will make the presentation to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. And, we just approved for this 2-year extension to the current AUA. With that, we have a 2-year capital program that also goes with that extension that the airlines have to approve. Once the program is approved and we sell the bonds and implement, this did require that it goes back into the rate base for the airlines. So ultimately the airlines are paying through this through their rate base. These were all projects that we deemed absolutely necessary to move forward. They are projects that are critical to the infrastructure and the operation of the airport, and the airlines had their presentation. They're currently voting on those. They have to get back to us by November the 13th, I believe, Antonio, is the deadline, maybe the 11th. We anticipate that they will approve all of these through their majority. So we're setting in place, getting ready to do the bond sale for these.
They have until November the 11th.
November the 11th, okay.
Rhonda and Antonio, I'm happy to share my screen and just walk through the couple of pages of the presentation if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Bear with me one moment as I just share my screen.
David, could you also just, I'm not sure if it's part of the presentation, but could you just introduce yourself to everyone on the committee?
Absolutely, and apologies. Good morning, Aldermen and Alderwomen, and good morning, Clerk of the Board of Aldermen, excuse me. My name is David Sinfield. I serve as I'm sorry.
I think someone forgot to mute themselves. You're good, David.
Oh,
please
okay.
continue.
Absolutely. My name is David Sinfield. I serve as the Managing Director for Siebert Williams Shank. We serve as co-municipal advisor to the city's airport alongside PFM. And I primarily assist with the development of capital planning, underwriting, and strategy for the airport with respect to its bond issuances for its capital projects.
I think it's just you, Rhonda.
Can you hear me now? Is that a little better? Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Can you also see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's just a 3-page presentation, so it'll be very, very brief and quite high level. Absolutely please interrupt me with any questions during the presentation or afterwards as well. As Rhonda mentioned already, the plan consists of 133 million of projects, 73 million of other airport projects is what we'll call them, and 60 million for primarily a baggage claim project. And the airline use and lease agreement is the sort of defining document that was used to build out both approval and agreement with the airlines before proceeding to this point. The majority and interest provision is the provision as part of the airline use agreement that is sort of the mechanism that allowed the airlines to determine that, especially the airlines that have the most financial interest in the airport, to determine that they were interested in moving forward with these projects with the city. And it's important to note that the bonds that will be issued by the city and the airport will be paid back, not by the city's general fund. However, they will be paid back by the airline use agreement fees and airline rates and charges from non-aviation revenues. So essentially the airlines and the passengers will be paying back the debt service on these bonds. Moving to the next page, we just quickly have a overview of the sort of capital plan and the impact of the capital plan on the city's airport's current outstanding debt. As you can see on the table on the right side of this page, we expect to issue about $136 million of bonds. There will also be about $7.3 million worth of premium that's due to the fact that we likely will be issuing premium bonds sometime in January. Proceeds of the bonds, the uses will be, as I mentioned earlier, $133 million for projects throughout the airport, and approximately about $9.8 million for a debt service reserve fund. The debt service reserve fund is a component of the bonds that sets aside money in the instance that, for whatever reason, the city's airport doesn't have sufficient funds to pay back the debt service. They'll access the debt service reserve fund first. The all-in cost that we currently expect using current market rates is about 4.7%, which on a historical basis is still relatively low despite the fact that interest rates have gone up. And the average life of the bonds will be about 14 years, even though we're issuing bonds with 30-year structure, 30-year maturity. Average annual debt service will be about 7.8 million. And you can look at the graph on the bottom of this page, and you can see the blue bars represent the airport's existing debt service. That is the debt service that it currently owes to investors. And the small gray bars on the top of those blue bars represent the additional debt service that will be produced by this upcoming bond issuance. It's important to note that the airport has done a really good job of conservatively managing its debt service. And as you can see, over the next 10-year period, that's when the majority of the airport's debt service will be paid, and it will substantially decline in about 10 years, which both rating agencies and investors alike really appreciate. Moving to the last page, we wanted to just quickly talk about timeline and the team. I'll start with the team on the bottom actually first, and then I'll move up to the top of the page, which is timeline. Looking at the bottom of the page, there's a number of external parties that serve the city and the airport. I believe, I want to say all of these parties, with the exception of maybe one firm, have served the city and the airport on different bond financings throughout the years. And almost every one of the categories of external parties consists of either at least a minority-owned business or at least one woman-owned business as well. And then moving to the top of the page in terms of the timeline, we expect to post the city and airport's preliminary official statement on Wednesday, January 11th. The preliminary official statement is a disclosure document that goes out to investors to provide them with information about the upcoming bond issuance, as well as the impact on the airport. And then following that week, we plan to price the bonds on Wednesday, January 18th. And then we'll have about a 2-week window before closing on Tuesday, January 31st. With that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you again for your attention and time, and I will pause there for any questions.
Okay, questions from the committee, Alderman Vaquero.
Yes, first have them unshare a screen so we can see everybody.
Oh, sorry, I'll stop sharing right now. Bear with me as I try to figure out my tech.
I do have a few questions.
Forgive me, I'm not finding the button to stop sharing the screen.
It should just say stop sharing at the top. Usually, David, at the top of your screen, it'll say stop sharing.
Try to close this window.
There we go.
There you go. That's
But
awesome.
Sorry about that.
I do have questions. What's the bond? How much is it going to cost us for the bonds? You know, that we pay to the companies doing them. And are these local companies or is these companies from out of state that are going to be issuing the bonds that we're working with? And the other question is, since we're passing it along to the passengers coming in, how much is that going to raise us and how competitive or uncompetitive does that make us in the market? So there's 3 questions to how much it costs, what's going to cost us to issue the bonds, what's the cost? You know, are these local companies issuing the bonds? Or are we going somewhere out of state again? And how much will this increase?
Alderman Vaccaro, I'll answer the third question. I'll have David answer the first 2.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
If you like, Ron, I can jump in on the first one right now. So in terms of cost, we're estimating right now just under about $1 million for the total cost of issuance for the bonds, and that will include, and granted, again, some of that is based on fixed costs that aren't based on the size of the deal. Some of that is based on the size of the transaction, which is 137 million. Those costs include paying for several different types of counsel to investors for the city, as well as for underwriters, to pay for credit ratings, which are the ratings that investors use to evaluate the credit quality of the security package of the bonds, for electronic distribution of disclosures, including the preliminary official statement, and other sorts of disclosures that are required during the process, including pricing wires that go out to investors, to pay for the actual underwriting of the bonds, to potentially pay for bond insurance, and to potentially pay for a reserve fund surety. And for context, to put the 1 million in context, early this year, the city and airport issued a $15 million refunding, similarly consisting of some fixed costs and some costs that were based on the size of the transaction. And that deal had a $632,000 in fees to external parties. So that's the first question regarding the cost. The second one regarding local firms. There are a number of firms that have local offices or are headquartered in the city of St. Louis. I want to say, I think based on the table that I'm looking at, I think every category of external party has at least one firm that has either an office or is headquartered in the city of St. Louis.
So the majority, even though my computer's frozen, I think you can hear me. The majority of this is from out of state then, and maybe small participation in the city. What firm would be in the city that I would recognize?
So for example, the co-manager Stern Brothers, one of the underwriters, is based in the city of St. Louis. Then there are several others that also have offices within the city of St. Louis, including my firm, Siebert Williams Shank, Denton's, which is a firm that's serving as co-bond counsel. Salisbury and Associates also is based in the city of St. Louis. Hardwick is based in Missouri, but they have offices in the city of St. Louis. Loop Capital, the senior manager, also has offices in the city of St. Louis. Bank of America, similarly, Huntington Securities, which is one of the co-managers. And then White Coleman is based in the city of St. Louis. UMB Bank has offices in the city of St. Louis, and Comer Capital has offices in the city of St. Louis as well.
Okay.
Alderman Vaccaro, I would also like to add that our senior manager, Loop Capital, is in the process, I believe this month, of actually being certified as an MBE with our MBE, WBE, DB office at Lambert.
So that would make me pose a question on this. You said there's some participation. What percent is it participation of minority-owned businesses?
I don't have a percentage for you, but I would estimate that just looking at this right now, because all the fees that have a co, meaning there's 2 people in the role, the fees are split down the middle 50%. So I think every category except for 3 of them have co's. So those are all split 50-50. Of the 3 that don't, 2 of them are actually minority-owned firms, so those are 100%. And then 1 of them is a non-minority-owned firm, so that goes 100% the other way. So it's actually probably majority. I would say majority of the fees are going to MDEs, actually.
Okay, and then the other last, Rhonda, where are we at in the market now as far as cost, our landing fees and our passenger fees? And where will this put us at in the market? Is this going to make us more uncompetitive, or how's that look?
Sure. So, you know, there's 2 things. I think we've touted that we have got our costs down relatively low within the industry. And that's been over the last several years of bringing in more revenues, bringing in more partners, but also being able to pay the debt down and then refinancing and the ratings that we've been able to obtain. So one of the things that the airlines look at, obviously they have a vote in this because they're the ones that ultimately pay for this, is we ran financial models showing what the increase of this would be over the next several years. It's relatively low per year, Joe, because of the overall spreading of it. There are 2 separate projects in this release of the $132 million. All of the airlines in both terminals will participate in $73 million of the capital projects. One of the other projects is solely for Terminal 2, and that is to add an additional bag claim to meet the demand and growth that we've seen in Terminal 2. The cost of that will substantially be borne by Southwest. They believe that that's important to the growth of their operation, to continue growing traffic here and also to meet the customer demand based on that. Even though we know that if we move forward with this terminal agreement, that, you know, the life of that terminal it will be shorter lived, but they believe that it's an investment that they want to pay for and they want to make. So all of the carriers will share in that 70 million. So it has a pretty small impact annually on their rate base. From a landing fee perspective, I don't believe that's impacted at all because most of these are terminal projects or equipment projects where we're purchasing equipment that we need. We lost a lot of equipment in the flood. We hope to get some of the monies back on that, but we obviously have to buy that and then work through all the insurance claims on that. So, and the terminal rental rates right now, if we look at the Terminal 1 rental rate, I believe we're at $21. I think the Terminal 2 rental rate is around $23. Those are some of the lowest terminal rental rates anywhere in the country. So the airlines are very open to saying we're willing to see that cost go up a little bit in order to ensure that the airport can operate financially. From the passenger perspective, the passengers won't pay any of this. Today, where we have across the country the ability on every ticket, there's collected a $4.50, what we call PFC, passenger facility charge. That's something that was implemented by Congress 20 plus years ago. So every passenger pays that today on their ticket. It's collected by the airline. The airline keep 11% of that for just the transaction of it. And then that's paid to the airport. So we will be using some of those passenger facility charges that we've accumulated to also pay a portion of this back. But there's not an additional cost to the passengers themselves.
And Rhonda, if I could just add one more thing to that, which is there's a metric called cost per enplanement that a lot of airports and airlines consider very, very seriously. And among similarly sized airports, St. Louis has amongst the lowest in the nation. It's also been like that for a long time, somewhere around the $13 range. As an example, one competing airport is Midway in Chicago. You know, their cost per enplanement is north of $30. So it's more than double that as an example. Another one is Kansas City that hovers around $15, $16, which is north of that. You know, there's a number of other airports that I can go through that all have cost per enplanement metrics that are well north of the city of St. Louis. So the city is starting from a very competitive position already, and has ample capacity to add on what in this case would be a minimal amount of debt service, which would still make it competitive compared to other airports that, you know, the airlines could consider shifting traffic to.
This will be my last question, and it just has to do with freight coming in. Is that going to affect the cost when, you know, I know they do it by how much the plane weighs and all that, but is this going to affect that too now?
No, on the landing fee, the cargo carriers do not pay a terminal rental rate fee. They have a lease of their buildings, which are separate from the terminal. All carriers, whether they're passenger or cargo, pay the same landing fee. But again, these projects are more terminal based, so they're not going to impact the landing fee. If they do, it's a couple of cents, Joe, and I don't even think there's it's impacting that at all. So this will not impact on the cargo carrier side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the time.
You're welcome.
Okay, Alderwoman Middlebrook,
I have no questions.
Alderman Ryan,
No questions right now. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans,
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. On page 9, the whereas section from line 3 to 11 talks about outstanding bonds. Can you all give us a little bit more background on those?
And
Sure.
Tony, go ahead, David, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I could.
No, go ahead,
Antonio.
you're fine.
What I can share is that the airport currently has, I want to say, and Antonio could give me the exact number, between 500 to 600 million, I believe.
No,
of outstanding debt.
425.
425, so it's come down. And most of that debt was incurred at the start of the millennium, the vast majority of it. And since then, it's been coming down substantially. I think the most important thing I would share about that is that the average annual debt service currently is less than 60 million per year, and it's to come down substantially in about 10 years. The reason why I say that is because most airports in the country don't have debt service profiles that are similar to St. Louis. Most of them have substantially more debt. They're paying substantially more annual debt service, and most of them have debt service that goes out, you know, well past the 10-year point. So in aggregate, the city has a really good financial position. The other thing I would share is that the city's airport has bond credit ratings in the A2 and A rating category, which is pretty standard for airports around the country. But I'm not sure if maybe Antonio wanted to add anything else, or if that answered your question, Alderwoman.
I think you answered it pretty well. I mean, that is the amount that is outstanding, about like 400 million, 425 or 50 million. But, you know, with the refunding plans that we've had in place for the last few years, working with the comptroller's office, we were able to substantially refinance these bonds, achieve lower interest rates, and achieve present value savings, which helps continue to reduce the amount of bonds that we have outstanding.
Thank you so much. It just seems like a lot outstanding, but it's interesting to hear it in comparison with other airports and what that looks like. I appreciate the answer. Thanks. It's my only question.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Gross.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay. LaTanya, was there other folks that were going to be presenting on the board bill? I thought you had mentioned some other names.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if our senior manager on the deal from Loop Capital has any comments, and then Rebecca Perry Glickstein of PFM, which is the city's financial advisor. So I would turn over to Clarence first.
The only thing I would add is that, you know, we're excited at the opportunity to lead the transaction for the city. And, you know, as David mentioned, the St. Louis Airport is in a unique situation where they have relatively low debt service outstanding, and they have attractive landing fees, which should make it attractive going forward for the airport in the city. So we're honored to be leading the transaction, and I'll pass it over to Rebecca.
Hi, good morning. This is Rebecca Perry-Glickstein from PFM, and I don't really have anything to add to what David and Clarence have already said, just to echo that the airport's financial profile is very attractive relative to other airports in the country.
And Chairman Cohen, I would probably say that we are definitely looking forward to a very, very successful transaction for the airport. And I'm going to turn it over to, I'll turn it back over to Chairman Cohen.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for working with us. And I actually love working with the Transportation and Commerce Committee.
You're too kind. Thank you for the flattery. We'll go ahead then. Let me just check to see if there's any other questions that are out there. I am not seeing any hands raised on the call. Let me just go through that list one more time. Okay. Seeing no other questions, I'll entertain a motion that we pass Board Bill number 102 out with a due pass recommendation.
So moved
Second.
in previous role.
Hey, it's been moved by the alderperson from the 23rd Ward that we pass Board Bill 102 out with a due pass recommendation. It's been seconded by the alderwoman from the 2nd Ward. And there's been a request for previous role. Is there any objection to previous role? Hearing no objection, Board Bill number 102 passes out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you for your support and approval.
Wonderful. Thank you. Was this your first time presenting before the committee? I can't remember if you had a previous.
I have presented before.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I know you and I had a bunch of emails earlier this summer. So anyways, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is actually a resolution. It's resolution number 110, introduced by Alderwoman Middlebrook. So I'm sorry, that does conclude all of the bills that we have related to the airport. So everyone is welcome to stay and listen to the next resolution. But you certainly don't have to, and appreciate everyone's time this morning from the airport and comptroller's office, and look forward to working with you all in the future. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alderwoman Middlebrook to speak about resolution 110.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have a committee substitute for resolution 110. So do you want to do that first or second?
Well, so we have to have the resolution before us presently, before we can introduce the committee sub. So I guess if you want to go ahead and present the current resolution, and then you can speak to or then introduce. Well, I guess we would have to adopt resolution 110 and then move for the adoption of the committee substitute.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So resolution 110, thank you, Chairman Cohen and members of the committee. So resolution 110 is a tax abatement and sales tax exemption on construction materials for the Lighthouse Landing project. And this is a project that I'm super excited about. This project is actually 67 acres, and it's north of Interstate 270 near the Mississippi River in the 2nd Ward here. This project is going to bring jobs and tax revenue to the city of St. Louis. What this will consist of is a hotel, an indoor water park, conference center, a marina, and there's going to be retail space. This project will also, the partners and the developers for this project have agreed that they are willing to partner with SLPS to get jobs to students exiting high school, some probably still in high school, who are willing and able to work. There will be an average of 450 employees with an annual salary of about $27,000 and a payroll of about 12 million from this project. And so the tax abatement on this will be, let's see, an industrial revenue bond transaction with the developer to provide up to 115 years of real property tax abatement in the following percentages: 90% for the first 5 years, 75% for the next 5 years, and 50% for the last 5 years, and a sales tax exemption on construction materials for this project. I have several people here willing to speak on this project. So I can turn it over to them to answer any questions that the committee or anyone in the public may have.
Okay, so are there people from city government that are presenting on the project?
The developers are here to present on this project.
Okay, but no one from SLDC?
Zach Wilson, Rob Orr, and several attorneys here for SLDC if there's any questions. We have a couple scorecards, but we can present those later after the PowerPoint from the developer if you would like.
Okay, so I have a habit of not swearing in city employees, but if there's a non-city employee or non-representative of the city, I need to have them sworn in.
Okay, I think developers have an attorney and their whole staff is on the line here, so that you probably have to swear them in. So,
Chairman
Okay.
Cohn, this is Dan Cook with Cook and Riley. I represent the developer in this matter. In addition to myself, there is two individuals from M2 Development Partners, Tim Morris and Ford Martin. Tim will be giving a presentation to the group. So those are and there's also David Sweeney is also with us.
Okay,
So those
Madam
are the
Clerk, can you,
individuals that are city employees?
Madam Clerk, can you please swear those 4 individuals in?
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give today in the cause will be in the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
I only heard 3, but I don't, do we typically do those as a group or do we need to do them individually?
We could do it however you want to do it individually, or you want to do it as a group.
Okay, I heard 3 responses there. So that's my,
We could do it individually.
okay.
Okay, so Tim Morris.
I do.
Ford Martin,
I do.
Daniel Cook,
I do.
Dave Sweeney.
I do.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We can proceed then and with whomever is planning to give the presentation to the committee.
Well, I'll
Okay.
kick this off if that's all right, Tim, and then turn it over to you for the presentation. Just very briefly, this is a project in North St. Louis, basically at Riverview and I-270. It's going to be an entertainment venue that includes a water park and a marina, as well as a couple of different hotels. And this is just the first 2 phases. And that's what's been scored by SLDC at this point. And that's about 325 million plus worth of development. It is anticipated that there will be some add-on phases that will be another 100 million roughly, but that has not yet reached the point where it's been scored by SLDC. I think one of the things you're going to hear about today by some of the people that are lined up to speak are regards some environmental and safety concerns that they have about, in particular, the marina portion of the development. I guess from our perspective,
some of these environmental and safety concerns shouldn't be taken lightly, and we're not taking them lightly. In fact, we've already engaged with a whole litany of federal, state, and local agencies on this project. But frankly, some of the things regarding the marina portion of the project, which has not yet been designed, those concerns are going to be addressed down the road with these various agencies. And I think Tim, as part of his presentation, is going to have a slide that shows a list of dozen plus organizations which we've already engaged with to discuss these, and which will have to approve any sort of development that goes in and around the river there. So that this will be done. It's just maybe not appropriate for this committee, because this, respectfully, what we're here today to discuss is whether or not the incentives package that's been recommended by SLDC and the Port Authority, which deals with a up to 15-year tax abatement and a sales tax exemption, would be appropriate for this project. So I think with that sort of introductory lead in, I will turn it over to Tim Morris, who is the managing partner for M2 Development Partners.
Oh, good morning. Ford, can you get control of the presentation? All right. Well, good morning, Aldermen, Alderwomen. Obviously, we appreciate your time. I want to try to go through this reasonably quickly, and then be able to circle back and respond specifically to any questions you all have. I want to just make one note that the project is called Lighthouse Point and not Lighthouse Landing. It may have been Lighthouse Landing in its previous life, but we are going with Lighthouse Point. So just wanted to make that point of reference. So Ford, you go to the next slide, please. As Dan pointed out, I think you all are aware of the site, 67 acres of, sort of pristine riverfront there. And, we're quite excited about it. Next slide. So this happens to be a picture that was taken back in 2003. Current ownership acquired the site in 1999. And before they started doing all their work to the site to bring it to its current condition, they took a shot of sort of what this particular stretch of the river looked like back in 2003. And if you can zoom in a little bit, you'll see railroad ties sort of piled up along the riverfront, a lot of overgrowth, et cetera. So, it was, clearly part of the Mississippi Ecological Program, but it sure as heck wasn't anything unique, I guess, about that stretch of the river. Next slide. So fast forward now up to 2021, 2022. What you see here now is a site that has been elevated out of the flood zone, out of the 10-year, out of the 50-year, and now out of the 500-year flood zone. And this represents obviously a huge amount of effort on the part of ownership to get the site in its current condition. So as you'll see in some of the future slides, the amount of work that's gone into getting this ready for our plan for development. Next slide. Just a quick vicinity map. I think you all are obviously well aware of where the site sits. I think one of the most critical benefits to the site, in addition to the riverfront location, is the fact that it's about 1.2 to 2 miles away from the St. Louis Zoo Wild Care Park, which is anticipated to draw between 3.5 million visitors a year, all of which have to drive directly and past this site. So our idea is to obviously create a destination where visitors that are coming to the zoo can spend time at our location, capturing them for a night or two, and being able to create sort of a real destination for not only St. Louis, but for the region. Next slide, please. This is just an artist's rendering of sort of what the project can look like. As you can see, there's a breakwater that's created there, and then the marina tucked inside of that, as was mentioned by Dan and others. The various components include the marina storage, boat storage, indoor water park, themed hotel. And next slide, please. So the first two phases of the project would include those items that have been discussed. And then we have a future phase 3 and 4 where we see those as potentially limited service hotels, some F&B venues, and other uses that are sort of going to be driven by the market, depending on sort of what input we get as we roll out the first two phases. So I think the point that was made earlier is that what SLDC is purported to be around a 200 or 325 to $350 million project is again really just the first two phases of this. We think when it's fully developed, in phase 3 and phase 4 come online, that the total value of the project will probably be somewhere closer to 450 to $500 million once that sort of gets, the determination is made and it's developed. Next slide, please. So we met with the mayor a few months back and had discussions about sort of what the administration's goals are, which are highlighted on this slide, as we wanted to try and ensure that we, whatever we do on the site is impactful and obviously involves achieving many of the objectives that the mayor and her staff have for creating jobs, increasing the tax base, and the like. Has been stated again, we're looking at roughly 450 new jobs in the first two phases of this project. Next slide. These potential tax revenues and job creation are taken from input from two of the entities that we're currently working with, Edgewater Resources, and we'll have a slide on them. They're going to be the marine development partner for that project, and then American Resource Management, who are going to be doing the indoor water park, themed hotel, and some F&B venues. So this is not something that we just sort of created, out of thin air to justify what we're trying to do here. This is taking, real input, real dollars that we're projecting to be spent and coming up with, again, potential tax revenue, job creation, et cetera. So, this is based on fact as we know it today and not projection. Next slide, please. So again, this more or less just reiterates that $325 million budget number is sort of, again, phase 1 and 2. We've got where those various sources are coming from, relate to hotel taxes, convention center, the job creation, and the like. We will provide a copy of this presentation to everybody. I won't read to you, but you can see that a lot of this is, again, based on valid projections on the people that we're going to be using and developing this project with. Next slide, please. We are very much interested in creating on-site job training to be able to train people for the various positions that we're going to be looking at in hospitality and others. We're going to be coordinating with Slate. We've also have a long history of working with the union building trades. I started in development in the early 90s. My first project was with the union building trades, and we've got almost a 30+ year relationship with them. I was actually in St. Louis about 2 weeks ago and met with the heads of all the building trades to introduce them to the project and to sort of get their involvement and interest in the creation of a training center within the site to, again, train people who are going to be working on this project, but also looking at training for the various building trades. So, this is obviously a high priority for us as part of our overall development. Next slide. As Dan pointed out earlier, some people have expressed concern about the ecological impact of this development. Since ownership purchased the site in '99 up to today, they have interfaced with all of these various agencies at some level to be able to facilitate getting the site elevated out of the floodplain and getting it ready for current development. In addition to this, our company has developed on riverfront in the past. We had a site, was a mile of frontage on the Manatee River down in Bradenton, Florida. We've developed on the Gulf of Mexico. We have a site on the Atlantic Ocean. So, we have a lot of experience in dealing with the Army Corps, the various DEP organizations within the various states that sort of manage the riverfront, et cetera. In addition, Edgewater Resources, who are going to be our marina development partner, have been involved in over 400 marina projects throughout the country. So they obviously have a long history of understanding the nuance of dealing with riverfronts and lakefronts and the various, again, agencies that have to be addressed, the concerns that have to be addressed. So all I can tell you at this juncture is to rest assured we've got a vast amount of experience. Our partners have a vast amount of experience, and we'll clearly be going through the right processes with all these different agencies as we advance our design for the project. Next slide, please. These next two slides, more or less, are just give you a history of all that's gone on as it relates to advancing the site since its acquisition through to today. I won't bore you with it, but it'll be in the presentation that we'll be forwarding to you all. What you can see is a huge amount of effort that's gone into bringing the project to its current state and bringing us literally in front of you all today to try and advance this incentive package. Next slide. Our company, I'll take 2 minutes on that. Our principals have been together for over 30 years. We've developed all over the world. We currently, some of our premier projects is Ritz-Carlton Towers in Nashville. We're finalizing our capital stack for the construction of that. It's a 46-story tower and a 32-story tower. We have a couple other multifamily tower projects, project in Savannah, project in Vero Beach, Florida. This is an example of sort of some planning that we've done for another riverfront site that allows us to sort of maximize the density and also retain the beauty, the natural beauty of the riverfront as an amenity for all the people that would be coming to the site. The next slide is another example. This is a site down in Florida that has sort of a canal element and then an intercoastal on the other side. This one will also have a marina component. But again, these are the types of projects that we get involved with always an eye on, maintaining the natural beauty and taking care of the natural environment. As I mentioned earlier, Edgewater Resources, they're going to be our marina partner. Again, 400 plus marina projects under their belt, extensive experience and a great reputation. Next slide. The American Resource Management. Okay. American Resource Management is the group that is looking at the indoor water park and the themed hotel, along with some F&B venues. And again, between Edgewater Resources and American Resource Management, those are the entities that we work with in developing, again, the projected taxes, job creation, et cetera. Next slide. This is a third project partner that we're currently in discussions with called Flying Squirrel Trampoline. They have 14 locations in North and South America and Canada. They've got some proprietary technology to ensure the safety of the participants. And they also have sort of a Topgolf element to their stuff, zip lines and kart racing. So they would be another potential partner that would come into the project, obviously adding additional jobs and additional tax revenue. Next slide. So next steps, we've been through the Port of Authority. We're speaking with you all today. And then we have, obviously our priorities are to get development agreements done and to continue to advance the process on the path that we're on today. So Again, we'll give you a copy of this presentation. Next slide. Obviously, we're going to try and coordinate closely with the zoo so that we can ensure that, you know, their goals and objectives for what they're doing will be aligned with ours, so we can create, again, a real destination for all the visitors that we anticipate coming in to the site. I think that's it. So I'll open it up. I guess, again, thank you everyone for their time, and Dan or David, if I missed anything, please fill in, but again, I appreciate everybody's time.
Okay, anyone else that we swore in want to provide presentation or follow-up?
I'm all set. I think Tim covered most of it.
Okay. We'll go ahead and take questions from the committee, and then Alderwoman, we can talk about your committee substitute after that. Alderman Vaquero.
I have no real question. It looks like a great place for an RV park in phase 3 and 4. But no, it looks good.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
No, I have no questions.
Of course, it's your resolution. Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few questions here that people have come to me about. First off, did SLDC rate this project? I know that you must have. I'm just curious what the rating was.
Yeah, this is Zach Wilson with SLDC. We scored it. One phase got 5 out of 5, and the second phase got 4.75 out of 5.
And okay, just to provide a little more context to that, this was one project that we kind of had to score it as a 1A and a 1B, just because of the mix of uses and the size of the investment.
Understood. Thank you. Now, I guess this is probably more for the developer than for SLDC. Were there any studies done on environmental impacts of this project?
Dan, do you want to weigh in on that?
I don't believe that, as I sort of alluded to in my opening remarks, other than working with FEMA to get it out of the floodplain, the environmental studies that we anticipate will be in the future when the project is further along in the design stage.
Understood. And then I know that you the mock-up is pretty cool looking. How many slips do you anticipate in that marina?
I believe it's 150 to 175 slips is what was initially being discussed. And there's that dry dock storage, which we didn't really go into, is going to be able to very quickly take your boat out of the storage and get it down to the water slip, so that there'll be kind of a concierge type of boat service. So you could call up in the morning and say, I'm going to be there in 2 hours, 3 hours, and they'll have your boat ready to go. So there'll be a total of 300 slips in there.
And then in any of your other projects that you've done, have you done marinas like this near a major port, like the Port of St. Louis?
Well, the one we did in Manatee County, I mentioned earlier, the Mile of Friends of the Manatee River, actually had a component where you would come off the river and come up a little canal, and then you would have your boat lifted over a concrete barrier to bring it into clean water. But you know, so the answer about being close to port, no. With regard to doing stuff on the river, yes. I think the point that we make about this particular location is that there's that barge canal that was cut that takes most of the traffic, actually all the traffic, out of this site, past the site, and then reconnects it to the river north of this site. So the beauty of what's here is, you know, we have that chain of rocks, the water slows. It's almost like a lake in a lot of ways right there, which is sort of perfect for boating. So, I don't know if that's answering your question, but, this site is probably one of the best sites on the river because it calms, the water is probably as calm as it's going to be in that whole stretch for quite some time. I don't know, Mark, if you want to add anything else, but I think that was what makes this so enticing for a potential marina.
Sure. Yeah. I guess the concern that I'm hearing from some of my constituents, and I'm hoping you may be able to weigh in on this, because I've been out on the river there, and it certainly didn't feel like a lake to me. But I do have a concern about adding, 200 or so people on boats that close to the Port of St. Louis, just out of concern that an amateur on a boat could cause some serious interruptions to the Port of St. Louis traffic. And I'm just curious if that's been discussed with the Port of St. Louis at this point.
Mark, can you weigh in on that, or Dan?
I guess, and I hate to keep putting you off on this, but I think my answer is sort of along the same lines, is that those studies are going to be done further down the road, and absolutely those discussions are going to have to take place. That will be part of the design process and the regulatory approval process.
Is there a reason that we're seeking incentivization on this before we have those studies done? It looks like Dave Sweeney may have some thoughts there.
Yeah, Alderman, if I may, and I'll let Dan weigh in. I think what's before you is the incentive piece, as you stated, and that's what the Alderman and your committee are here to evaluate. And those concerns are definitely well-founded. And I think for this project to go forward, those have to be in place first. It's like a chicken and the egg thing, Alderman. Why would you invest all this money and time if it's a no-go from the start? So, and again, that's what sits before you. There are experts that will weigh in, the litany of organizations and federal agencies that, we're not throwing a dock up here. This is a significant project, and there's going to be significant overview and oversight. And that's for those agencies and those experts. And before you today is really just the incentives to get that going. This is a long ways away from fruition, but all of those organizations will be weighing in significantly for it to go or not go, Alderman. To your point, if that's the case, then it won't happen and they won't get those approvals. Obviously, I don't want to speak for my client, but they feel confident in that, but they're not going to invest the time and energy until they know they can even afford to do this project.
Sure. And yeah, I guess my concern, because on just looking at the pictures of this, it looks great. And, the numbers look great to me. But my I guess concern would be that we incentivize this, we get some bad news from regulators in the future, and then I don't know where we lie then in regards to the project moving forward. Have we just incentivized kind of a dog of a project, or would the say Port of St. Louis have the ability to hold up the project altogether?
Well, I don't think again, my name's David Sweeney. I'm a lobbyist hired by the client for all those on here, as well as an attorney with Lewis Rice. I think if it's a dog of a project, it's not going to happen, Alderman, right? And it won't go anywhere. But $350 million, not only the points you brought up, you're right, the pictures are amazing and everything, but also is an investment in North St. Louis of $350 million of, I see you shake your head, yes, and we all know this, that's significant. And this is a huge opportunity, and it's to feed off of the zoo that was mentioned earlier, but true investment in North St. Louis. And that's what we need to keep focusing on and going forward. And like I said, I not to dismiss your concerns, but I've been on the river as well. I grew up in Davenport, Iowa, so I'm well aware of the Mississippi. But I'm not an expert on it. It'd be just as like if I drove on a highway every day. I'm not an expert on the highway. I think people will weigh in, and this project won't go there, but we won't know until if you guys are supportive of this project and Alderwoman Middlebrook to go to the next steps with it. Dan?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add is that, you know, Edgewater Resources, as I mentioned, you know, they've done over 400 of these projects, and they've spent quite a bit of time on this particular site, evaluating the site, obviously having some discussions with some of the agencies that would be, regulating what goes on here. And it's their opinion that, you know, this is a site that they can get approved. Otherwise, they wouldn't have, you know, invested the time and resources that they have already. I mean, we've got a potential infrastructure budget that they put together that our team validated of about $13 million for roads, sewer, water, the riprap to go in to create the marina. So I can tell you that this has not been sort of designed in a vacuum with a lot of hope that we can then carry it forward to the various agencies and get their blessing. This has been, you know, a lot of detail, a lot of analysis has gone in from very experienced, you know, people who do this for a living and have done it, as I said, you know, over 400 times, to believe that we will get the support for this project from those agencies. So I just, you know, again, I don't want to give the impression that we're, you know, rolling the dice and hoping. You know, we're here because we feel very good about our chances of getting this through and approved as we currently perceive it will be.
And I appreciate that, and thank you all for your time. Chairman Cohn, I would ask if the Alderwoman from the 6th is on, if you would give her a chance to weigh in, if she would, at some point. I know she has some subject matter expertise on this that I'd just be interested in hearing.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. I've got a list of people who are wanting to speak for and against the bill. We'll go through that, and then I will also entertain questions from any of our colleagues that are also on the line.
All right, thank you so much. And that's all I have. Thank you all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My apologies. I skipped out of my agenda here. Madam Clerk, who's next? Is it Alderwoman Schweitzer?
Yes.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
No, Evans.
It's Evans.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderwoman Evans.
Yes, I just have a few questions. And I know that the project at hand is strengthening neighborhoods and bringing new infrastructure investment to North St. Louis. I'm trying to see how so will that strengthen North St. Louis? I don't know who can answer that.
Well, Dave, do you want to start? Maybe,
Well, yeah, and I think the perfect person to answer would be Alderwoman Middlebrook, whose wards that is in. But I think the first point or thing I would state, Alderwoman Evans, is jobs. And that will strengthen neighborhoods and access to jobs that transportation isn't as much of an issue. You're not driving 20, 30 miles, but you're driving a mile or two or taking transportation there. I think with investment comes not just this site, but investment around it. And that's how we improve North St. Louis, with the smaller businesses or improvements within there, but also the NGAs of the world. And this is, although not billions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and people coming in there. And that's another thing I think it will do to North St. Louis, is get people visiting North St. Louis to see it and to come in. And I think the zoo will be a huge thing, although in the county also very on the edge of North St. Louis. So that's what I see, but I would defer to anybody else.
Well, I also think, you know, there's the tax revenue generation, which is always a good thing. You know, so, but you know, our history of development has been that if you develop something that makes sense for the area, fills a need, that from that will come other development, sort of like the old rock in the water and the ripples that go out. So, you know, this is a pristine site on the riverfront. There's not a lot of these available, and we think by doing it right and creating a destination that again is aligned with what the zoo is going to do. There'll be a lot of other positive spinoff, but I think what we can say today is job creation and tax revenue are the two big things that would be a benefit to North St. Louis.
Alderwoman Evans, I would also add that it would be a benefit to North St. Louis to just have this type of entertainment venue that would be closer to the folks that live in that area of the city so that they wouldn't have to travel further to do the sorts of things that would be available here.
Okay, I know
Also, I
that.
want to just add, I echo the sentiments of everyone that just stated something.
Okay.
The jobs alone, especially for a younger generation who are searching for jobs, who want to work, they want to make a livable wage in an industry that they can actually advance in. We're hoping to create jobs that people want to have a career in. So, you know, when you think career, you think long term. So jobs that people can retire from eventually, as well as the entertainment part. We know that North St. Louis does not have a lot of places where we as family members can go to have some fun, to have some entertainment with our families. And this particular project will give us that, which we're missing in North St. Louis, an entertainment venue where we can take our families possibly for, you know, food and beverage, sit down restaurants, as well as entertainment, swimming and things of the such. So yes.
Okay, will this be inclusive of the present entertainment that we have on the riverfront, like the excursions with the boats that go out that we have in St. Louis, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, that type of thing? Are those considered in this project? I mean, will they still be in existence? I don't know.
Dave or Dan?
Well, I see no reason why they wouldn't operate. They're on the arch currently, the ones that I think I heard you reference. So I see, and I think Bi-State operates those. I could be wrong, but I don't see what there'd be zero disruption to them, Alderwoman.
I think Bi-State does operate those, Dave. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'm finished with my questioning. I yield back to you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. I am looking forward to hearing from all the speakers that we have today, and know that there's a lot of people who are going to be giving testimony and more information. I'd also love to hear more from the city. There's a little bit of concern, I think, on my end with safety and environmental issues, especially when it's known how long someone will have to wait to get a boat, but not about how this will affect the environment. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to hearing more from others. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Gross.
Yeah, hi. I will just, I'll first thank Alderman Narayan for his questions, because that's basically exactly along the lines of my question, just about the timing of this, because, you know, I mean, with respect, I understand that you guys are working with a partner that's built a lot of marinas, but it does seem that the whole marina construction component of this is extremely premature. I mean, it doesn't look like there's been the studies and plans and that sort of thing. So I guess I was wondering, you know, I understand that you're going to work on that in the future, and that's the answer. But do you know from now through those processes, are there going to be other points for citizen input? Maybe when they're dealing with, you know, permitting for some of these things, or when they're reaching out and dealing with further approval processes for that? And I also just say, and I want to get, and I'm going to make that's my question, and I'm going to make a point, because I'm probably going to have to switch on my phone and listen, because and my point, this is actually very timely. I've been on vacation the last few days. I'm about to fly back to St. Louis, but I've been down in the Caribbean, and here in the Caribbean, this is where I've done pretty much all the boating I've ever done. And, you know, I've definitely seen how having a marina here, you're not just seeing like you know, the boats that there and, you know, fees and all that, I mean, it creates an entire industry, an entire community around boating. I mean, I have no doubt that if there's a couple hundred boats being stored there, there's a whole lot of people that are gonna then, you know, get employed and learn how to work on boats, you know, work on and paint them. And you know, I could see how this project really could become, you know, a catalyst for economic development beyond just the project itself. So I will also say though, my on the flip side of that is, since I'm down here and I do a lot of boating in the Caribbean, I feel like boating's kind of dangerous in the Caribbean, where everything's just like nice warm water that you can jump into at any time. So, you know, I 100% share the kind of concerns and the thoughts people have that, like, is this really smart that we're having boating right by the Chain of Rocks Bridge? I mean, that doesn't seem like intuitively like that makes sense to me. But if there's going to be a lot of more opportunity to weigh in, you know, in this permitting process and all, and I guess that, you know, I guess we're hearing from you guys that all this stuff is going to happen in the future where we're doing this is a preliminary. And I understand that point, and I agree that, you know, you guys kind of need some assurances from the city that this is going to be there before you guys go through all that time and effort and spend a lot of money doing that kind of things. But can you tell me a little bit more about that process of the future stuff that you're going to do on the environmental things, and specifically, you know, are there going to be other points for public input in that?
My experience has been on riverfronts, on the Gulf, on the Atlantic. The Army Corps of Engineers is typically, you know, the ones who weigh heavily on those decisions. There's obviously input from DEP, you know, from the various states as well. My experience with the Army Corps is that they're, you know, they make their decisions based on their analysis, and there's not a lot of input from, you know, citizenry. I mean, that's typically more at, you know, the city or state level, if, you know, there's approvals that need to come through there. But on a national level, the Army Corps, historically, I have not, you know, we do our studies that they require, we present them, they come back with follow-up questions, we respond to those questions, and then, you know, they might do a site visit. They typically have local people that are working with them or part of their organization that weigh in, and then they render a decision. And then DEP, you know, it's sort of the same thing. They'll want an environmental study, they'll want an environmental impact study, how many boats we're projecting and all stuff. And then their analysis is done and they come back with follow-up questions and we respond to that. And then they typically render a decision. So, you know, for those two agencies, I don't see that there's a lot of public interaction. You know, there may be other things at the city level or county level, but for the agencies that typically weigh in, it's done by professionals and it's not an emotional thing. They, you know, they obviously have a ton of data and they review that data with professionals that do this every day. And if there's clarification needs to be given, we have to give it to them to get them comfortable. And, you know, I've seen cases where they come back and say, hey, we'll agree to this, but we can't do that. And then so there's a little bit of push and pull as it relates to what ultimately we decide. I mean, they may come back and say, hey, you know what? We think the right answer is, you know, 80 slips, not 125. And here's why. And then we adjust accordingly. But, you know, it's a process. And, you know, we've been through it. As I said earlier, Edgewater Resources have been through it. But I don't know, you know, to be totally candid, there's a lot of public input as it relates to getting this approved on the river. I think they view it as they're the professionals and they understand probably more so than, you know, somebody off the street. So they're going to be the ones weighing in for the greater good of the, you know, of the area and for natural resources and for the environment.
Thank you. One more question. Was the numbers that are scored by SLDC, I'm sorry, the numbers that were how it was scored by SLDC, and I know we got the chart in the drive. what kind of goes into evaluating the economic impact of the project in terms of like, third party after effects of the development? Kind of like I was talking about, like, are you guys considering like, people working on building boats and working on boats? And are you guys considering like the charter captains that come out? Or are you really only looking at like jobs created at the project? And I don't know who's that's more of a question for.
Yeah, my name is Jake Narup. I'm a financial analyst with SLBC. So I'm the one that completed the model for this project. So to answer Alderman Gross's question, this is the economic impact that this is capturing is really just the direct kind of project impact. So this would include, from an employment perspective, this includes the 450 jobs that have kind of been proposed that are directly associated with the development. This does not capture any of that sort of indirect spending that you're alluding to. But obviously those numbers would only kind of improve the overall picture.
Thank you. I don't have anything further at this time.
Okay, I do actually have a couple follow-up questions before going to other members of the Board of Aldermen that are represented, and then we can take questions from the people who are here to testify either for or against the project. So a couple of my questions for the developer, just how many of the projects have you completed at this point? The presentation that you walked through, you discussed projects that you're currently working on or partnering with other cities, but how many of those, I think you mentioned that you all have been working together for 30 years. Is there anything that you've, as your current development entity, M2 Associates or whatever, I can't remember the name because the presentation's not up, but what projects have actually been completed?
Yeah, I've completed the one with the mile of frontage on the Manatee River, which was about 1,200 units, probably 300 to 400 single family home lots, 250,000 feet of retail and some towers. And then we did a condo project on the Gulf of Mexico that required FDEP and Corps of Engineer approval. So both of those projects were completed. Both of them went through a similar process dealing with, waterfront sites.
And what were the names and cities that those were in?
Positano, which is on Longboat Key. And I have to give you the other one. It slips my mind right now, but I can send it along. Dan can send it along to you. This was about 10, 12 years ago. So.
Longboat Key, that was in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, that's the Gulf of Mexico one, yeah.
Okay.
The other thing, Chairman Cohn, if I may interject, is that we did talk about in the presentation only briefly Edgewater Resources, which would be the sub-developer that would be used in this project. And that, we do not have anyone from Edgewater with us today, but they have completed, I believe it's 400 plus of these types of projects in North and South America combined.
Yeah, they're going to be the ones that you're going to want to have their list from, but we can provide that for you. But that's, I think to Dan's point, that's the deep well of experience there.
Yeah, it would certainly be helpful for some context to have that. Sure. My next question is, just related to the financing of the project. How much of your capital stack do you have in place at this point?
Well, we're going through getting the site appraised now to, sort of finalize our acquisition. And then we'll fund the due diligence as it relates to master planning. And then we're working with the 3 potential users now. Some of them want to acquire sites and do their own. Some of them want us to put the sites in. So, as I said, like any project, we're sort of trying to put meat on the bone, if you will, as it relates to the structure. So, but we've got, again, extensive sources for equity debt that we've used for years for our various projects. And it just depends on what's the right fit. This happens to also be an opportunity zone. And so that opens up a lot of investment from funds that, want to do the opportunity zone investment and get the tax benefits that would be part of that. So, again, we're into that element of it right now, but it just depends on how we structure these initial 3 deals going forward.
So do you currently own the land then for phase 1?
We're going through the appraisal right now. Once we get the appraisal done, which should be this week, then we'll move forward and close on the acquisition.
Do you own any of the land in phase 1 currently?
No, the people that are partnering with us, one of the gentlemen is going to be part of our ownership team, who's one of the current owners. But no, we're going through the appraisal process, and we're going through this process so we can have a clear understanding of what the economics of the project look like. I mean, this is a critical element of the decision to move forward, is understanding what it looks like from a long-term development perspective, which is why we're sort of trying to get clarity on these incentives at this juncture in the process.
How many parcels are part of the site then?
I think there's 3, Dan, right?
There are 3 parcels. That is correct.
Is that just for phase 1, or is that for the total project?
That's the whole 67 acres, 67 plus acres.
Okay. And then the zoo's been referenced a number of times during this conversation. I'm just wondering how many conversations have taken place with representatives from the developer or the developer themselves with the zoo?
Mark, you've had a conversation or 2, but that would be the extent of it at this point.
Yeah, it's my understanding there's been several conversations that have been over a period of time. I mean, one of the concepts here, Alderman, is that the zoo, this would be symbiotic because of the fact that you'd have all these places to stay and restaurants right next to the zoo that wouldn't have to be built out, so that people would come here and possibly stay, go to the zoo, and then visit some other attractions in St. Louis, which is why we think it's going to be a regional attraction.
Is there anything in the affirmative that it's a symbiotic relationship, that they're supportive of this? I mean, I hate to say I'd like to hear it from the giraffe's mouth that, themselves, but
Well, I would invite you to ask them because they, our indications are that they're excited about it. And again, Mark's had a couple of conversations, and Dan, so, I can't imagine that they wouldn't be. Because obviously if you can keep people in the area for a day or 2, it's just better, for everything. And it presents more reason for people to show up. If you create a regional destination, they can do the zoo one day and do our stuff one day. So I think as a draw, it would just be something that, they would be in support of. But I'd invite you to probably chat with them, and I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing. If not, I'd be shocked, and I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, it's been referenced so many times. I would hope that there is some sort of, conversation or partnership or, mutual understanding that this is going to be beneficial for all the parties involved. And certainly, the zoo is a public institution that's supported by our taxpayer dollars as well. So definitely don't want to, I would want to know their position on that, since they are so close. And my understanding, at least based off of their, future plans, is that this is going to be more experiential than what a typical zoo would be. So certainly, if they're planning on having revenue from hotels or whatever, would want to make sure that any of their concerns are addressed. If they have any, they might be very supportive. And, I know this has already been, brought up. I'm not sure if it's been brought up from this perspective, though. This is just south of the confluence, right? So this is the largest 2 navigable waterways in the entire continent of North America. And they collide essentially right there at the confluence. And so the Missouri pours a lot of silt into the Mississippi River right there. You know, any Google map you can look at from above and see the just silt that's going right down and right along, you know, this particular bank as well. So I'm curious, you know, I know that you all are still wanting to go through like the environmental plans and all of that kind of stuff for the site, but just from a feasibility perspective, what challenges does that present? I know that the site's been built up, but if you have silt that's coming in constantly into the waterway right there, I struggle to kind of understand like how often you all are. It just seems to me that there has to be like a modern day miracle of engineering that needs to happen to address, you know, that in and of itself. And then, you know, I guess two of my colleagues have also brought up the, you know, concerns of just the boats themselves. And this particular part of the river is not navigated by barge traffic because of the chain of rocks. So I think my colleague from the 24th Ward was, you know, concerned about how this might impact barge traffic. Barge traffic actually has a canal that they use on the other side of the river. There's a canal that's been built specifically for barge traffic because of the chain of rocks. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't be an accident. You know, I mean, heaven forbid, you know, an amateur boater capsizes or runs into the chain of rocks because they don't know that they exist. I mean, I don't know how that could be, but you know, stupid as the stupid does. It will probably happen, I would imagine. And I'm just, are there going to be licensing requirements? Are there going to be, you know, regulations on the size of boats that, you know, can be docked at the marina? You know, what types of things would, you know, help prevent those types of tragedies or situations from occurring?
Well, I mean, I think every state has different boat licensing requirements. Usually it involves like a, you know, a safety class, Coast Guard safety class certification, et cetera. So, you know, I'm sure that would be part of it. But, you know, it's hard for me to sit here and tell you that accidents won't happen. I mean, people drink and they do stupid things. People do stupid things without alcohol. And again, I mean, it's just that there is no set answer as it relates to what might happen here. All right. I mean, I think the idea is that we want to try and create an environment that is safe. It's an area that's safe. And, you know, from that, I mean, I just, you know, I can't guarantee anything. You know, I'd love to be able to guarantee anything, but, you know, it just isn't feasible. So people do dumb things all the time, and boats involved, not boats involved. But I think at the end of the day, we'll do everything we can to create a safe environment for the people that are there, that are using the marina, they're using the, you know, the rest of the development. And, you know, beyond that, we react and learn, you know, and that's, I can't make a guarantee.
No, I'm not asking for a guarantee. I'm just asking, you know, has there been any thought put into that at this point, in terms of how we can prevent those from happening in the future?
Yeah, well, again, I think that there's a safe boating requirement, licensing. As I said, I'm not sure what Missouri's requirements are, but I know in Florida, you've got to get a boating license through the Coast Guard auxiliary usually. So, you know, beyond that, again, I think there'll be a certain element of live and learn with some of this stuff. But again, I think to not always go back to our good friends at Edgewater Resources, but if they've done this 400 times, they got a lot more learning about marine operations than I do. And I'm sure they would put all the systems in place that they've had experiences with this new project to ensure that it's as safe as it can possibly be, you know, when we started and as we operated.
So is there a representative from Edgewater here today?
No, unfortunately not. But, you know, had I known we were going to be focused on the marina quite as much, I would have I can probably try and see if I can get somebody on real quick.
Yeah, that would be great if you're able to. And I can continue going through some of my questions here. So I don't see it in the resolution. I thought I had seen it in the resolution. Maybe it was in the presentation, but did someone mention the average salary? Was that SLDC or Daniel?
Sure. It's about 27,000 full-time equivalent. It's 12.2 million payroll over 450 jobs.
So the average salary will be 27,000?
Correct.
So that's okay. So that's $13 an hour for an average, and an average is taking the highest, the lowest, and all of them in between and averaging them out.
Correct.
So when you have an average salary that's $13 an hour, that means that there's probably going to be people who are either all making $13 an hour, or there's people who are going to be making significantly less than $13 an hour, and then people who are making $50,000 a year.
And I would say a significant part of that is because the jobs are part-time. A significant number of the jobs are part-time. So the 27,000 is just the FTE, the full-time equivalent, when we take the total payroll divided by the total number of jobs.
Okay, but FTE is a full-time equivalent. So you would be using that as a 40-hour work week then versus a 20-hour work week, because a 20-hour work week isn't the full-time equivalent position.
Correct. We just took the total payroll of 12.2 million to divide by, because for the payroll and earnings taxes purposes, the only number that's relevant to the analysis is the total payroll, because we're taking 1% for the earnings. But the developer may be able to provide more context as to how that payroll breaks down on a job-to-job basis. We just have kind of the blunt payroll number to put into the model.
But if someone is making $27,000 a year on a part-time basis, then they potentially are actually making like $54,000 a year on a full-time basis. There's a difference there in terms of the annual rate or the hourly rate that someone would be making.
Yeah, well, I think
that's pretty significant.
Yeah, I think your analysis is correct. I think that, they're looking at part-time in that 27, but I think, otherwise the average would probably be in that, 50 plus. I mean, you're talking about, certain service jobs, you're talking about other type of things. So I think, realistically, that range somewhere in the mid 50s is probably a good average on an annual basis.
Yeah, I think we need to actually provide that information because I sponsored the city's minimum wage increase bill several years ago. I have a very difficult time supporting, incentives of this size for wages that are low. So Jake, Zach, going to need your analysis on that and maybe look at annualizing those salaries versus whatever analysis you use to get to the $27,000 for an average. Because that's not going to fly. And my last question, I actually kind of already touched base on, so I'm not going to belabor that any further at this point. But Tim, were you able to get anyone from Edgewater by chance?
No, I got a voicemail, so I asked him to give me a call.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think between Edgewater and the zoo, we probably have like two kind of critical components that I would like to at least have some conversations with over before we have an actual vote on this. But I do know that we have speakers today. We'll go through that. I'm actually going to turn it over to my vice chair, Alderman Vaquero. Are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Would you mind going through our other colleagues that are on the line and seeing if they have any questions of the developers? And then if I'm not back in time, can you go through the people who have signed up to testify in favor and opposition to the bill?
No, that would be fine. The only thing I'll tell you is I do have something at 12, an interview at 12:30, but
I shouldn't be more than 15 minutes.
oh, no, I'm good. And I can always text them on the interview. It's about tomorrow's meeting. Anyway,
Okay.
no,
If you could just take over and I'll be back in it just momentarily.
there's no rush. I'm fine.
All right,
So,
thank you.
so other older people that want to speak, can you turn your pictures on for me and raise your hand so I know who wants to speak? Okay, I see Alderwoman Gracia. Do I see anyone else with their hand up? The only one I see with the hand up would be Alderwoman Gracia. So Alderwoman Gracia, go ahead and you're free to. Okay, we have a couple. We'll start with Alderwoman Gracia. It's the first one I saw. So go ahead if you would, please.
Thank you so much, Alderman. I guess the first few questions I have would be for either Tim or Dan. You presented a slide listing all of the agencies with whom you've had conversations or been partnering with on this project. And I'd like to know for each agency, the individual with whom you're speaking and the last time you had a conversation with that organization. So can you talk about the Army Corps of Engineers first?
Dan?
Yeah, that's the previous owner that's been having those conversations. I can get you that, but I do not have that information today.
Okay, I did ask you about that in our telephone call last week, and to my knowledge, the last conversation was somewhere around 2017 or 2018. What about FEMA?
The letter came in 2016.
I know the Lomar was in 2016. I don't know. Has there been additional conversations with FEMA? I don't believe so.
Okay, U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
2018.
Roughly 2018.
Coast Guard?
Probably 2018.
Department of Natural Resources in Missouri?
They're there doing site visits pretty regularly, but so probably either this year or last year.
Okay, the Department of Conservation?
Pretty much the same as DNR.
Okay, the Department of Transportation in Missouri and Illinois?
As recently as last week.
On both Missouri and Illinois?
Both.
Okay, Great Rivers Greenway?
Probably a couple years on that one.
Public Safety for the City of St. Louis?
So that probably would have been back with FEMA. So I believe that was 2016.
Planning and Zoning? City of St. Louis?
2018, we believe.
St. Louis City Fire Department?
Last week.
And with whom did you speak?
The chief. I
Okay.
did. Client.
Who spoke with him? Because I texted with him yesterday and he didn't seem to know what I was talking about.
That would have been my client, Mark.
Mark Repking?
Correct.
I'll double check with the chief on that. Water Division?
Kurt Scooby
About a month ago.
with the commissioner.
And it was with Kurt Scobie?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. If you could, on the ones that you weren't sure of, if you could maybe update the chair and he would be able to pass that along to other persons who are interested. I guess I'm a little bit surprised and concerned. I understand that there is a lot of permitting that will need to happen for the marina portion of this moving forward, but this is our opportunity as elected officials at the local level to ask and have questions answered on behalf of our constituents. And so, you know, to the point that Mr. Morris made a few minutes ago, when it reaches the federal level, it's kind of out of the hands of local government. And so now is the absolute perfect time for us to be asking difficult questions. And it seems very irresponsible to me as for you all as the developers to not at least have had some preliminary conversations. I mean, at a minimum with the Corps of Engineers. They are very easily accessible. I speak with them on a regular basis about a variety of issues. I've already had conversations with them on this project, and I'm sure they would have been able to provide some guidance that you would be able to come and talk to us here today about with respect to the very significant environmental and public safety concerns that are involved with the marina. I'm not going to belabor them because I think many of them have been brought up already, but there's a reason why the tows and barges go through a canal that we spent multi-millions of dollars building in the 1940s. It's because the chain of rocks, bedrock shelf, is the largest hazard on the entire Mississippi River. So we diverted all of that commercial traffic to the Illinois side. In October of 2021, we had an experienced sailboat captain get stuck in the chain of rocks because even though he was an expert in sailing, he missed going into the canal at the confluence of the rivers. So to think that this is a safe place when the fire department and the Coast Guard are putting in downtown to do any sort of rescue or recovery operation is of huge concern to me. We also have pallid sturgeon spawning ground in this area. It's been identified as the second or third most critical area for that species to be able to survive. They're critically endangered. It's also the 60% of the migratory birds in the country use this flyway to travel north and south each season. And I think Alderman Cohn alluded to the fact that the deposition, the way the water moves from the Missouri, the sediment and deposition and silt loads are absolutely incredible. And the water just doesn't rise and lower. It leaves behind catastrophic amounts of cleanup that is incredibly expensive. And so I appreciate the quick answers on questions and just wanted to say to the committee that I think that there are very important things that need to be answered before it makes sense to move a marina forward. I mean, are you guys able to move the project forward without the marina?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're in the preliminary planning phase of this thing. So, we always felt that the marina would be well received as part of the overall plan. But, if we can't do it, I mean, obviously, we'd have to relook at it. But, we've always sort of felt like it was integral to what we want to try and accomplish here, because bringing the riverfront into the development makes it vibrant, and it, is a good thing. So, listen, everything's on paper right now. We're not, so that's all part of the process.
Okay, I appreciate that. No further questions.
Okay, and if you could provide the timelines that you just sort of gave us, if you can send that just in an email to the clerk. And if the clerk would give it to the chairman and spread it through the committee, that would be really nice. Alderwoman Rice, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So starting off, I guess, in line with some of the questions from Alderwoman Ingracia, at the beginning, it says that this land has been built up out of the 500-year floodplain. Was that an effort undertaken with the Army Corps of Engineers that this was we weren't potentially diverting Missouri waters around this, or what was the permissions that you all had to go through to build up land like that?
And
there was a displacement study that was done through the Corps of Engineers. That was the permitting process, as I understand it.
Okay, and so do you have any idea what the analysis of the downriver effect of that?
No rise certification, so there's no effect.
It was a no rise certification that the property received, so.
Okay. And then I guess I am curious about conversations with public safety and Coast Guard and kind of how that works, because I went ahead and did a quick Google search of what it takes for a boat license in Missouri, and 14-year-olds are able to pilot boats in Missouri. And that gives, I mean, we have lots of issues with our drivers, let alone boaters in this, and so thinking about what a 14-year-old on a boat could potentially do in this type of an area, you know, to your knowledge, were there any, you know, comparisons of boating incidents, boating accidents in areas like this that were undertaken?
Again, let me respond, and I hate to keep using Edgewater Resources as an old tea bag for every tough question that gets asked. But again, I think based on them, you know, I haven't done as many of these marina projects as I have, they probably have that data. And again, probably have, you know, put policies in place to try and prevent. Like anything else, you know, new policies are always a result of something that's happened in the past, so that they sort of keep adding on to them. But I would have to defer to them as far as, you know, exactly what they would have in place to try and minimize, you know, safety concerns for people. I mean, but I don't have an, otherwise I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. You know, one of the other, you know, searches I was doing was just kind of what common knowledge is out there about the chain of rocks hazard, and about how, you know, folks are encouraged either to put out around, you know, if you're on a paddle boat, encouraged to sort of walk your boat around this area. And I hope we're not going to be encouraging folks to try to get through that area. But one of the recommendations on one of these sites I found was, you know, to go through the channel that is used by the barges over here. And the Mississippi here is one of our nation's largest commercial transport areas, right? These barges, right now we're dealing with incredibly low levels of water. Barges are lining up to get down, you know, all the way from Minnesota down to New Orleans. And so the idea of putting 300 potentially more boats onto this area, notwithstanding, you know, folks that are coming in and out, it seems like sort of a catastrophe for commercial transit through this area. So I have significant concerns about putting more boats into this area. And I respect the fact that you're working with partners who have done other marina projects, but it doesn't sound like any have taken place on rivers or commercial corridors like this. And so that is a huge concern to me. I greatly respect that we are trying to do transformative development in North City that's going to benefit the residents of North City, that's going to benefit our region. But I don't see, if this project can't go forward without the marina, I don't see how we're even starting this conversation, that we have a potentially environmentally devastating marina project, and potentially through public safety as well, that we're going forward on, not knowing if this piece of the puzzle can even exist. The one other question I had, so along the lines of what Alderman Cohn was asking about the jobs that are coming into place here, one of the conversations we're having right now in the city is around labor peace agreements. There was reference made to the building trades and having conversations with those folks as we're working on, you know, as you're looking into potentially building on this site. That is great that, you know, the building trades, we have strict standards in the city for wages, the prevailing wage requirements, minority and women-owned businesses. But when it comes down to the actual folks who are going to be staffing at this site, I would love to see there be a labor peace agreement included in this type of an incentive project, or at least a neutrality statement that if workers who are on this site eventually want to unionize, that the developers, that the owners will not interfere in that process. So, and maybe that's more of a thought for Alderwoman Middlebrook as we're going through this. If that's something that can be included, I think that would be really important. And that's all the questions. Well, actually, I do have one more question. So there are two more accompanying bills along with this project. So this resolution is here in Transportation and Commerce today. On Thursday, there is a Ways and Means hearing at 1 o'clock with another bill. And on Thursday morning, there's another in the HUD's committee with another bill. Is there, maybe this is more of a question for the sponsor, but is there a reason that this project is divided up into 3 different committees?
So,
Maybe she had to step away. Oh, there she
I'm
is.
sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So yes, I was informed per the rules that one part of it had to go to Ways and Means. This part had to go through TNC because of the port, and the other one because of development had to go through HUD. I was
Okay.
trying to get everything into one meeting, but because of the different elements, it had to go to 3 separate committees.
Okay, thank you, Alderwoman. Right, that's all that I have. Thanks so much.
okay, and then I saw Dave Sweeney, his hand up, but the next that person has not spoken is Alderwoman Davis. So Alderwoman Davis, I see your hand up. I don't see your picture on here yet. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, you're here. Alderwoman Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to be brief. There are an awful lot of questions being asked and suggestions of what cannot or should not occur. All of this is taking place without all the appropriate due diligence being completed by all of the agencies and entities that are local, starting with SLDC, moving through with the Public Safety Committee, also, and not the committee, but the department who will weigh in with police, fire, and all the other things that are involved here. Looking at all of the state agencies that provide permits. We have DNR, and the list goes on and on. There are so many experts that will be involved in this who know and will make the right decisions on behalf of the residents and the city of St. Louis. There's none of these agencies that have not done this before. There's none of these professionals that don't know their job. You know, I read a long article today that talked about how far behind we are in the US as far as having port cities that we build the futures to, including not just pleasurescapes, but also making sure that they are providing additional opportunities for food and many other things. In the European countries, those areas are used and improved and are part of completing a city. We have a long way to go. And all we can do now is, I hope, say hooray that we have someone who is interested. We've been looking at this project for over 20 years. It's had its ups and downs, but we have now some partners who are willing to go the long haul. I'm excited about it. First of all, just the jobs that will be available, then the fund that'll be available. How many of our young people have never seen a boat? And a lot of you all don't understand that because you've been privileged to have explorations in your life. But we have a lot of children in this community who have never been off their block. And they've never seen certain things or experienced certain things. And so that's a great thing for the city. And then when you look at the land around it, across the way there, it could be developed as well for affordable housing, where maybe people who work there can just walk across the street and go to work. There's so much opportunity. If you start somewhere, you can build and go even further. I don't need anything else other than to hear from St. Louis Development Corporation that they have done the appropriate due diligence just for the continued exploration of this project to move forward. Because I do know and believe that any of the authorities that find that there are detriments or exclusions that need to be made, that will be done. So I wanted to say thank you to the developers. Thank you to all who have had any part of this over the last 20 years. because it died, totally died a couple of times. But I'm glad to see it's brought back. I appreciate the alderperson from the 2nd Ward. And I do know that the residents of that area can definitely benefit from this project. The entire city will. But if nothing else, allow the professional process to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. What I want to do, even though Alderwoman Evans, you're on the committee, I'm going to let you go ahead, and then we'll go back to Alderwoman Ingracia. So Alderwoman Evans, go ahead, and then we're going to go to Alderwoman Ingracia. I got
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Vaccaro. You know, I look forward to this project. I look forward to any project that's going to help enhance the North Side or the North City, because these things have been long overdue. And I want to make sure, I would like to make sure that we don't get passed by. As Alderwoman Marlene Davis said, and if anyone should know, she should know. It's been a long time coming. And I just welcome the development that's coming to our great city that includes the North City. And I'm hoping that my fellow alder people are happy that we're getting development. Any development that you guys have, I raise my hand to it. And I hope that you will also be behind us in welcoming this development. That's all I have to say. Like I said, I am ecstatic, and I welcome and look forward to the change and development that will help to enhance our great city. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you know, for the chairman, there will not be a vote on this today. Alderwoman Ingracia, you say you have a quick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick follow-up question. The no rise certification came up. Can someone speak to when that was applied for, approved and expired, and then when the final date was that fill was dumped onto the site?
Don't have an answer to that, or can you get us an answer to that?
I think we'll have to be able to provide that at a later date. We don't have that at our fingertips.
I would ask that that also be put in to an email sent to the clerk and given to the chairman of the committee, who will distribute it amongst the members of the board.
Can that be repeated? The
So,
request?
So, yeah, Dave, what they would like is when the fill was, I guess when they brought everything in to make it tall enough to fit, the rise. So for the flood, if I understand the question, do I understand it right, Alderwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just clarify quickly, there's a hydraulic analysis report that gets stamped by an engineering firm. So it would be when that was approved, when it expired, and when the developer stopped adding fill to the development site and considered it completed.
So, and then Dave, any of the other questions that were, if they can get something in writing back to the clerk, that would be nice.
As always, Alderman.
If that was all, then Alderman Narayan, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Vice Chair Vaccaro. I was just going to ask from the presenters, because I heard you mention that per Alderman Cone, we won't be taking a vote on this today. Whenever we do come back to vote on this, I was hoping that we could also have someone from Edgewater on the call in order to answer some of the questions that we weren't able to. That hopefully we could get someone from the Corps of Engineers on the line to address some other issues. Someone from the zoo. I know that had come up. Alderman Cohn or Chairman Cohn had brought up the zoo, and then hoping that we could also have SLDC have the salary study that Alderman Cohn had mentioned. I know that would help me a lot to come to a clear understanding of what I need in order to vote on it. So I'm just hoping that that when we do come back for a vote, that we can have that information readily available. Thank you so much.
I would ask that you put that in an email to the clerk, asking for those speakers, because he's actually the one that would get a hold of them, and include the chairman, so that the chairman can set the meeting up, the next meeting up, when he gets, he knows who's all going to show up.
Will do. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any other committee members. Madam Clerk, I know we have constituents that want to speak. I don't have the list in front of me. Do you have the list in front of you?
Yes, I do. I have a list of individuals who are speaking against Resolution 110, and that's Jerry Connolly.
What about, do you have pros and cons?
I only have those speaking against, no speakers for support.
Okay, because normally we would, just so you know, we rotate back and forth. So how many speakers do you have?
5.
Okay, can I get all 5 speakers to turn their cameras on and raise your hand for me? Do we have all 5? And you can just, if you just say I do separately, this way we count it. But do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth? So help you, so you affirm, or whatever, so help you God. You just need an aye if you do.
I do.
Turn your mic on.
Turn your mics on, please.
Yes, I do.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Okay.
Thank you all. So in the order that they're on your list, please, Madam Clerk, call them first, one by one. Our rules, although there's only 5 speakers and we do have a little bit of time, generally is a 3-minute time limit. But you know, we'll be a little generous with that. So if you can go down the list, you know, you figure even 5 speakers at 3 minutes will be here for a while. So try to please keep it within that, if you could, but we'll be a little generous with that. So Madam Clerk, please call then the list.
Jerry Connolly.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Vice Chair Vaccaro, members of the committee, fellow older people, and other members of the public, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Firstly, thank you to Alderman Cohen for his decision to hold this resolution in committee and not take a vote. I think there's a lot of due diligence on behalf of the elected officials as the board, and also SLDC, in terms of ensuring that the correct input from the other government agencies, which as we've heard today, their engagement in this project with the current ownership and with the proposed ownership entity has been limited. And I think the public is owed much better than that. I want to rewind back to the Port Authority meeting. This was on September 8th. And at their meeting, the resolution to proceed with examining this project had no details whatsoever about what terms of the tax incentives were being contemplated by the city, by SLDC, and possibly more importantly, by SLDC's bond counsel and consultants. That resolution was factually incorrect. It stated that the developer has site control. As we learned today, the developer does not yet have site control, even though it's under contract. I also learned today that there's one member of the current ownership group, Mark Repking, I believe, who is also going to participate in the new ownership group. That information was not disclosed at the Port Authority. I welcome Mr. Sweeney's clarification that he is a lobbyist on behalf of the client. I would like to hear after my testimony who that client is. Is it the new developer? Is it the
current owner of the property. I'd appreciate that being clarified. The exhibit to the Port Authority resolution, it was an 8-page document, and there was an exhibit that was an engineer's survey from July 2021. And in the southwest corner of the site, there's a Lot B. And I want to know, is that Lot B part of the tax incentive package? Because there was a gas station constructed on that site in 2021. And it was missing in the aerial photograph, but if you go on Google, you can see the gas station is there. Or if you drive up to the site, there is a gas station. Is that owner affiliated with the new developer, affiliated with the current owner of the property? And are they going to receive any tax incentives as a result of this resolution? This might be news to some people in the public. I hope the board are well aware of this. There's nothing in the state statute that requires the Board of Aldermen to sign off on this project for the incentives. I believe it's more like a courtesy protocol that SLDC and the administration go through here, where it's a resolution. As you know, board resolutions aren't binding, but unless someone can clarify this from the legal counsel standpoint, I do not believe that there's a requirement for the Board of Aldermen to authorize the abatement. The Port Authority can do that on its own. Also, the transparency aspects, you know, we're 18 months into a new administration. SLDC's undertaken and just released its Economic Justice Action Plan, which kind of lays out kind of a public engagement process for development projects. I don't think there's been any public engagement prior to this resolution coming before the board. And I also don't think some of the objectives laid out there in the Justice Plan align with what we're engaged in today. You know, both the attorney and the developers telling us that we've got two separate issues, the tax abatement, tax incentives, and the environmental concerns. But I think these are intrinsically linked together. And, you know, we shouldn't be incentivizing a project where a key component of it that exists, you know, is going to be constructed in the floodway in the river hasn't even been designed yet. My recollection from the port meeting is, you know, the developer didn't talk to the marina operator until sometime over the summer. And also following that port meeting, I sent a sunshine request into SLDC seeking a copy of the developer's application. I was told there was no responsive records. September the 21st, I sent in a second sunshine request. On September 26th, I got a reply saying there was no responsive records. And 4 days later, on September 30th, the resolution for these incentives was introduced at the Board of Aldermen. And I just kind of find, you know, when did SLDC perform their analysis? Upon what information did they analyze, and when did they receive it? So I think those questions, members of the committee, I would like you to get clarified from SLDC. And I'd also, you know, the next time you have a meeting on this resolution, I'd like to kind of see a full presentation from SLDC that's not just kind of responding to people's questions, but a full detailed presentation of the project and their analysis. I think that's all the point. Oh, the other point I wanted to make was that the industrial revenue bonds for the city, if you check the city's annual comprehensive financial report, I believe last year, 2021, there was almost $5 million forgone in revenue due to these programs. And the bond programs are not commonly discussed, but I think it would be, you know, behoove us all to kind of review what is going out the door in terms of revenue that could be captured. That's the annual comprehensive financial report. It is on the comptroller's website. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. And I do believe you're right about one thing. I think SLDC does not need the Board of Aldermen to do tax abatement. I believe that was something that was voted on. They have sort of carte blanche, if I remember right. And I could be wrong, but if I remember right. Madam Clerk, please call the next speaker. And if we can kind of try to keep it within that 3 minutes, please.
Okay, I stand corrected, Alderman, Chair Vaccaro. We do have one speaker in support of Resolution 110. Her name's Patricia Hopper.
Okay, so Patricia, you would be next because we go back and forth. So Patricia speaking in favor. And again, if we can keep it. Chairman Cohn, so we've gone through all the committee members. We've established there will not be a vote today. The first speaker speaking opposed just got done speaking. We have someone now speaking.
What would it be called? Final copy of 110?
We have someone going to speak in favor. So Madam Clerk, if you can call the one speaking in favor.
Patricia Hopper.
Patricia, are you here? I don't see
I
it.
need your video on, Ms. Hopper.
And we need to swear you in because I didn't see you in the original swearing in. Is she there? Yep, turn your video on. I'll tell you what, we'll move on to the next person and come back to her as she's working to get her video on. So let's go to the next person, which would be in opposition.
That's David Stokes.
Mr. Stokes, and then if you can keep it within that 3-minute-ish, please.
Absolutely will, Alderman. Thank you to everybody for allowing me to testify before the commission today. My name is David Stokes. I'm Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute here in St. Louis. I submitted my testimony online or in writing, and I know that the Board of Aldermen Secretary has distributed that to the full committee. I promise not to repeat everything I said there. I just want to reiterate a few key things. This project and these abatements are highly troubling in many ways. There's been a number of talk in this meeting about the promises of the jobs up at the site, a site I have toured, and Canute Pass, a site I'm very familiar with. So for all the talk about jobs, let's also talk about the fact that study after study, most importantly, the East-West Gateway study of tax increment financing and other subsidies in St. Louis, has proven that these types of heavily abated and subsidized economic development plans don't work. They're overpromised and underdelivered. The developers get the subsidies, they get the special abatements, but they rarely live up to the job promises. And that's what the East-West Gateway and many other studies have shown that, and this could be different. This could be the development that lives up to all the promises, but I think that's highly unlikely. And if this project and many other projects like it, if they need special tax abatements and special tax subsidies, well, I think it's time, instead of giving out certain subsidies and abatements to some, perhaps the city would be better off giving a smaller tax cut to all businesses and not picking and choosing winners and losers here. Briefly, at the opening of one of the presentations, there was a few pictures of the site before and after. It was removed from the floodplain. I don't think that's worth celebrating. And I think people on here were celebrating it. The old picture at the start showed land that was taking water as Mother Nature intended. And yet the developers, the current owners, were paid through both tax subsidies and money. Let's not forget that the money from the dirt from the Mutual Veterans Bridge project was the dirt used to take this land out of the floodplain. So they were paid to remove it. So that's 75 acres that is no longer in the floodplain. Well, they put 75 acres of other homeowners, other property owners, other land into the floodplain. And that's just the continued use of abatements and the like to develop floodplains in our region that have made flooding so much worse throughout the greater St. Louis region. And it's not a cycle to be repeated. It's certainly not a cycle to be celebrated. And I hope people, the Board of Aldermen, members of this commission, keep that in mind. And finally, my last comment, I was going to share concerns about the chain of rocks there. It's not called the chain of Great Lakes for beautiful pleasure boating. It's called the chain of rocks because it's dangerous. And it's highly concerning that this is such a big part of the abatement, a big part of the plan to receive this property tax abatement. I think there's a good chance it will be rejected. But if you're basing your abatement decision because of a beautiful marina, please keep that in mind. It's a very dangerous part. There's a reason all the other pleasure craft marinas in our region are on the Missouri River because it's much safer to go there. And I just want to strongly second the many concerns that Alderwoman Ingracia raised on this point. And with that, we have our testimony up for further information at showmeinstitute.org. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Alderman.
Yeah, Alderman Vaquero, I can take over the committee. Thank you. And I just want to also make sure, David, were you sworn in?
Yeah,
I was.
everyone.
Okay.
I have a Chairman Cohen, if I could. When it comes to tax abatement, I know someone brought it up, but isn't SLDC the one that's going to determine that? I mean, not the Board of Aldermen?
SLDC will work with the various entities involved to determine what incentives would work to make the project viable, and also make the incentives beneficial for the city in terms of future revenue, and then they evaluate it and rank it on their spreadsheet. But ultimately, we have to pass either a resolution or a board bill depending upon where the incentives are being offered. This one in particular is within the Port Authority boundaries and is specific to Port Authority incentives, which is why it's being heard on this committee.
Okay, I was just curious because I was trying to remember, because I know there was a vote that we had taken a while back. Anyway, thank you. I'll turn things back over to you.
Yeah, so I guess, and just as a frame of reference, so Alderwoman Middlebrook, who's sponsoring the bill, would not have been the one to determine what the level of incentives were for this project. She's simply the sponsor of the resolution based off of the recommendations from SLDC. So SLDC was responsible for, and the Port Authority would have been responsible for doing the intake and evaluation of the incentives before the resolution was introduced by the aldermanic sponsor. But underneath our current laws, we do need to have a resolution passed by the Board of Aldermen in order to enable the incentives. Okay, who's next on the list, Madam Clerk? I believe the alderman was looking for someone in support was going to testify.
Yes, that was Patricia Hoffer.
Okay, is Patricia here?
She is on, but I couldn't get her video. She doesn't have video.
Okay, is she able to talk?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and swear her in and hear her testimony. I believe the alderman from the 23rd was putting a 3-minute limit on the testimony.
Yes.
But we'll continue that.
Ms. Hoffer, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, I'm not getting anything back.
Ms. Hoffer? Okay, Madam Clerk, is there anyone else that's on the line that is registered to speak in favor or opposition to the resolution?
Yes, I have Michael Berg for opposition.
Yes, and it says the host won't let me put my video on. I don't know why it was shut down by the host. Oh, cool. Now that's changed. That is great. Thank you. My name is Michael Berg. I am a resident of the 24th Ward in the city of St. Louis. And right now I am speaking, representing the Missouri Sierra Club. I'm the
Have you been sworn in, Michael?
I have been sworn in.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed.
So and for the Sierra Club, testimony was submitted to Mr. Kennedy yesterday afternoon, our official testimony. And we, on behalf of our 730 members in St. Louis City, we oppose this project. We're dedicated to environmental protection. And there's a few things that are worrisome. Many of them have been brought up before. I want to reiterate what David Stokes said. We're not happy that this land was raised and that we have less floodplain just south of the confluence, the only confluence of the two largest rivers in North America. But there's still a flood risk. The golf course, which once occupied some of the site, was severely damaged in the 1993 flood. And after that flood, the U.S. Army Corps sponsored a major interagency flood study of the area entitled Sharing the Challenge, Floodplain Management in the 21st Century, that was published in 1994. That study still widely held as a comprehensive look at the Mississippi River flooding, with the St. Louis area at its center. Unfortunately, most of the recommendations of that study were not implemented. And so the flood risks have just risen and risen as climate change makes flooding events worse, and there's just too much development on the great rivers. And so even a raised area near the confluence still is vulnerable to flooding. It would be irresponsible to use taxpayer incentives to build such a settlement. If you can look at the repeated costs incurred in Maryland Heights development behind the Howard Bend levee as an example of just this type of problem. And then like many others, we're very concerned about the marina portion of the Lighthouse project. Do not think this is a good area conducive to boating. There's the bridge, there's the bend, there's the channel. It's a major risk to boating, and especially a problem so close to the water intake for all of St. Louis water at the waterworks. So we very much oppose these incentives.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk? Is there anyone else?
Yes, I have Charles Miller.
Okay. Charles, have you been sworn in?
I have.
Okay, wonderful. You can proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for giving myself and the organization I represent, Missouri Confluence Waterkeeper, the opportunity to comment on this today. We're based in St. Louis here on Locust Street, and I'm also a resident of St. Louis City, 17th Ward. And I think a lot of the environmental issues have been really well addressed by some of the folks on the call here, but I just want to bring up a couple things that seemed important to us. To Alderman Cohn's point, the breakwater is going to significantly alter flow in the river, and without some kind of study from the Army Corps or a full EIS, we're not going to know what the hydrological impacts are going to be. And as several alders have pointed out, it seems premature to take this step before we know the full consequences of this development. That marina and that breakwater are going to be built in the floodway, which is an area that is intended to be kept separate from, or intended to exclude any kind of permanent structure or development. And clearly, breakwater the size of the one that's shown in the renderings is something that's not intended to be in that floodway. I appreciate the fact that the developers have been in touch with people with experience dealing with waterfront properties, but I would question whether or not the specific properties they've discussed are really relevant to a development on, as several people have pointed out, right downstream of the confluence of the two largest rivers in North America. The Gulf of Mexico is just completely hydrologically different than a river that sometimes is peaking at tens of thousands of cubic feet per second. And the Manatee River in Florida that they described is a 36-mile long tidal river in South Florida, where the landscape is basically completely flat. And so it doesn't see the kind of variation in water levels that you necessarily would see in the Mississippi. And so, frankly, I would consider the experience that they've cited there to not be particularly relevant to any developments on the Mississippi. I saw a mention of 404 permits in their presentation. I'd like to, if they could provide more information to the committee here on that, and interested citizens, that'd be fantastic. I'd also like, if they could, to share their letter of map revision, because currently for the past 2 days, FEMA's website that contains that information has been down. So I haven't been able to get a hold of that. And again, I do want to echo both Michael and Sierra Club's comments and David Stokes' comments about floodplain development in general. We shouldn't be celebrating the fact that part of this was raised up out of the floodplain, because that does force flooding downstream or to opposite banks. And it's really a matter of shifting the problem of flooding rather than solving it. And then I believe I had one last point here. Is that only if you look at the firm maps, so they are correct that a portion of this property has been raised and is now excluded from the floodplain per the FEMA maps. But north of it, south of it, and west of it are all still within the floodplain. So if a flood event does occur, this entire development is going to be cut off from access from the outside. There's only, I think, one little strip of land that I couldn't tell you exactly how wide it is, but it's quite narrow, that connects this area that's been raised out of the floodplain with the area that's naturally not within the floodplain. Otherwise, it's completely surrounded by the floodplain. And so Missouri Confluence Waterkeeper would urge that when this does come up for a vote before this committee, that the committee reject this tax abatement. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee?
We have one more speaker.
Well, no, like of the speaker, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I forgot to do that with the previous two.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any hands. We'll go ahead and move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Sorry about that. That's Daniel L. Pate.
Hi, everyone. Do I self unmute?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'll be super brief. Thanks, everyone. I have been sworn in. I do swear everything I say is the truth as far as I know it. I just had a couple questions on this one. It really seems like the carts before the horse. This resolution came out with the abatement percentages before an application was submitted. It would seem, at least from Mr. Conley's sunshine request that went through. I appreciate the fact that there isn't 100% for 10 years and 50% for another 10 years. And I would like to see the actual scorecard that shows where 90, 75, and 50 came from with the return percentages and things like that. I appreciate SLDC using specialty mixed use area as the land use, which is a high bar in the scoring of this model. The way that it's been scored and evaluated seems to be, again, premature, with the possibility that the marina hasn't been designed as of yet. It's tough for us to actually get cost figures and things like that with something that hasn't been designed. If we could have a stress test of +20 and -20 of the budget to see how it scores, I think that would be prudent for us to take a look at. And again, someone has talked about the past use of incentives and whether or not they have actually worked. There's been reports that say that they don't. I would like to see if there's any way SLDC to go back, since they started using a scoring model in 2016 or 17, and take a look at projects that were evaluated. And if we could look at the budget versus actual, proposed versus actual on jobs, fiscal amounts, things like that, that would give us a lot more confidence in being able to move forward in awarding incentives for projects like this. It could be a transformative development. There's a lot of ways that this should be done. And I think following the economic development, economic justice action plan, and including neighborhood engagement with this, and having a transparent review process would be prudent. Thanks.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else that signed up to speak in favor or opposition?
No, that'll be all.
Was anyone able to get a hold of
Ms. Hoffer?
Ms. Hoffer? Thank you.
No, she only logged in with mic, no video.
Okay, but Ms. Hoffer, are you on the line? I see her name in the participants.
Right.
She sent me a, she sent me a real quick email, says Vice Chairman. So it says, oh, Vice Chairman, calling me to speak, but was not able to. I apologize for my not being able to hear me. I've never done a zoning thing before. She has a very old computer. So what I told her is, I thanked her and said, there'll be further meetings. So
Okay.
at this point, she just,
And she can submit a opinion or testimony by email or letter to the clerk as well, that will be shared with the committee. Okay. Is that everyone else that's been registered to testify with respect to today's resolution?
Yes, that's everyone.
Okay. So it sounds as though there's been already conversation about holding this for the moment. I wasn't, obviously able to keep track of all of the different items for follow-up, but certainly the ones that are on my list would be, having Edgewater available for our next meeting. Having the zoo available for our next meeting. SLDC, Jake and Zach, there was a request, I believe, from one of the committee members and myself, for a more in-depth presentation on the incentives themselves and the evaluation criteria that you used. And I would also like to see that number updated for the annual salaries that are being provided there, so it's more reflective of reality. And then Vice Clerk, was there anything else that we needed to follow up on for our next meeting?
I had asked everybody that wanted something submitted. I also asked Dave Sweeney to make sure the clerk should have wrote down. I said everything should be sent. I know some of the alders had questions on people they wanted to see. I said that should be submitted to the clerk and you as the chair, and that you would arrange a meeting based off of when you have speakers.
Right. Tim or Dave or Daniel, is that feasible to get Edgewater, since they're the primary operators of the marina and I guess the subcontractor that you'll be using?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, do you guys have dates that I can present to them, or?
I have to look at calendars and confer with members of the committee just to make sure that we have everyone's availability here, but I would hope that we can do that within the next week. The other item that I have outstanding, and I personally have challenged SLDC on this in the past, is I know we have a committee substitute that we were going to take up for this resolution as well. I sit on the Port Authority as chair of this committee. I don't believe that we've had any revisions to whatever we agreed to within the Port Authority. So I don't like putting the cart before the horse. If we are required to have approval from the Port Authority on something, then they need to approve it before it comes to this committee. Similarly, I like to have the same for Planning Commission or LCRA or any other boards that need to be involved in the approval of these things. They need to have, especially what this resolution doesn't specifically call that out, I don't believe, but it's a pet peeve of mine when we start kind of circumventing some of these to fast track pieces of legislation, so or incentives.
Okay.
But that's not on you, that's SLDC. So
I didn't feel it, but I heard.
Okay. Okay, but to answer your question, I would hope that we could have another committee hearing within the next week.
Okay, great.
Okay. Alderman Vaquero, was there anything else? Not hearing anything. Okay, so going back to our agenda, we'll put this on hold until our next meeting. I appreciate everyone's attendance and time this morning. I know I typically try to keep these meetings to less than 2 hours, and we've gone over that for sure. But certainly appreciate all of the public input in this, and feedback from our colleagues both on and off the committee. And I'm committed to continue having the conversation and getting more public input on this and additional information as requested. I'm just trying to pull up the rest of the agenda here. I believe that was our last item of business on the agenda for today. We had all members present. I don't have any other announcements or committee discussion at this point in time. So I will adjourn the Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting for today. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.